Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Or maybe we should find a better title for that. Yeah, that is probably yet another thing to think about. Yeah, let's just make sure everything is streaming pretty good here. We're not dropping any frames. Okay, I think we're good. We're trying lower audio on Yu-Gi-Oh! I got some feedback, which honestly is probably about the first time I've gotten feedback in a year or two as far as the audio being in the game too loud. It doesn't sound too loud to me, and I do like listen to the videos after they're recorded, and yet I don't know, like in my headphones I just think things sound differently. That's pretty much, I think, just how it boils down to it. And so there is just no guaranteed chance here of me ever really knowing what it sounds like on other people's equipment. So feedback is the only thing that would be slightly helpful. Today is Wednesday, March 13th. We might as well point that out. And I've had an interesting day this morning. I've struggled. Do we have any tickets? We don't. Yeah, we don't have any tickets yet. So I don't know why it's pointing me so much towards that. I've had just a bit of a struggle getting started today. Like, I really could have started streaming at about 10 in the morning for me, which is probably a better time. Like, inherently, I never know when the right time is to stream or do anything. Yeah. And yeah, YouTube doesn't help you any on that at all. They just don't let you get enough views as a small content creator to even begin to make a argument as far as what the right time is. We were right on the cusp of getting to platinum in ranked play, but I guess we'll do the Duelist Cup. The other thing that probably is feeding my sluggishness today is the fact that I'm still playing Hand of Fate 2. This jumped me up to level 7 to begin with, so ideally we would want to get up to level 17 or even level 19. We kind of don't care if I make it all the way to the second stage, but we should double check what the rewards are for the second stage. If you make it to the second stage, you're probably just going to get 10 more Duelist Cup reward tickets, unless you can get in the top 1001 to 10,000, which will get you a bronze medalist and a title and 10 more things. Of course, if you could actually get to bronze higher levels, you would get more Duelist Cup reward tickets, but even if you were number 1, it's just a new title, a new icon, and more tickets on top of tickets on top of tickets on top of tickets on top of tickets. And I would assume that these stack, but maybe they don't. So maybe 10,001 or more gets you 10 tickets, and 101 between 500 still gets you 10 tickets. And I don't know what season points even are for. Like, I've forgotten completely what the deal with that is. So on Hand of Fate 2, and this will be a quick accountability section, I was really struggling to just keep on playing. Each mission is too long of the 21 missions that it seems to have, each based off of one of the major arcana cards of the tarot. So you have a mission called the Hanged Man, you have a mission called death, you have a mission called Strength. Strength in particular is one of the missions I just cannot win, and I just don't even see a way I could win other than just banging my head against the wall. Each of those missions really, I think, should be at most about 30 minutes to play, and instead they are running about 45 minutes to an hour to play, and it's just a lot going on there. The game is not cheating in any way in your favor for any of the random dice rolls or other kinds of random gameplay mechanics, nor is it really helping you when it forces you to fight enemies and play in a completely different game style. It really is a broken concept to have what is a fairly janky 3D third-person hack and slash fighting mechanic crammed into what otherwise is a tabletop deck building game. You really should just be fighting enemies, if you are going to fight enemies, by rolling dice or some other tabletop similar mechanic. It would be the equivalent if in the middle of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! All of a sudden you had to pull out a controller and button mash to fight between two of the monsters. It just doesn't make sense. What also doesn't make sense, and I think these are problems that were problems with Hand of Fate 1 also. I don't think they really improved Hand of Fate 2 much, and they could have taken their time and done more, or really thought things through. But as a deck building game, they make you run into random encounters or random equipment before you can even know what the cards do, which just wastes the player time. You really, as soon as you unlock a card, should be able to look at it and see what it does, and then plan a strategy in the deck building before you start a mission as to whether or not you want to play the card or not. But to unlock a weapon and have no idea what the weapon does until you find it in a mission is just ridiculous. So yeah, there's a lot of problems with it, and I do feel like, looking at the achievements, I'm almost certainly directly in line with what other people are experiencing with Hand of Fate 2, in that I'm just seeing a lot of other people that have very few achievements, very based on how far you've gotten into the game. And so I was just about to give up completely on Hand of Fate 2, because the rogue-like gameplay style, in which if you fail, basically no progress carries over. The only thing that really carries over if you fail in a challenge, in the regular challenge, is that you know what the cards that you've seen do, and maybe you gain some cards or upgrade some cards. Let's see, I probably should have tossed that card or whatever. But then there is these adventure challenges, which are, I think, DLC. In particular, I started playing this one called the Map Maker. And in the Map Maker, it switches completely from being, it switches significantly from being a rogue-like game where very little progress or no progress resets or carries over from run to run, and you're just back to square one at the beginning of every run, to a roguelite game where there are riddles in the Map Maker event, and if you unlock the riddles, they stay the same from run to run, and they're automatically unlocked. So it is going to probably take me 6 to 10 runs through the Map Maker to defeat it and get gold, because it is a very large map with some pretty heavy dangers. it's way more doable. So I will finish the map maker. There's another adventure DLC one called the Serpent. I'll try the Serpent, and I imagine I will also be able to finish the Serpent. I am not certain, however, if there are any more adventure things. That it may just be that there are 2 adventure challenges, and that is that. If that is the case, well, then I don't think that's going to help me any further as far as wanting to play the game more, or otherwise have a way of defeating the main challenges, which I really am just painted into a corner. And Hand of Fate 2, I nearly rage quit the whole game before I finished even the first mission, the first challenge, because it was so difficult in the fighting game mechanic. And thank goodness they have an apprentice mode, an easy mode for the fighting mechanic, but it didn't really help as much in the long run as it should have. And so now, 29 episodes later, at 45 minutes to an hour per episode, I am running into a third act problem in which one of the remaining companions, of which there's 5 or 6 of them, cannot be unlocked unless I defeat the mission, the Strength. And I am just not capable of defeating the mission, the Strength, in a reasonable amount of time, in an unfrustrating manner. And if I can't unlock the companion from finishing the Strength, that is directly gatekeeping the ability to do, I believe it's a mission called the Sun, which requires that you have all the companions unlocked. And if I can't get any of the other missions done, then I am just gate-kept to the point where I can't go any further. It's not the Sun, it's the Devil challenge that requires the companions. Yeah. And the fact that it is the Devil challenge makes me wonder if I can't do the last few missions because I haven't unlocked and played the Devil. Now, storyline wise, each mission is supposed to be just like canonically the events of your life in a row. So skipping a mission, going out of order, or not being able to play a mission really ruins the whole storyline experience. I'd also say that the dealer / narrator of Hand of Fate 2 is just increasingly getting annoying, in that in most occasions he says nothing, or he'll repeat himself and say something we've already heard, or he'll just admonish you for taking too long to play. It's not a very good strategy game for as much as it should be a strategy game. And see, there's this newer game that I can't remember the name of, that I think took the ideas of Hand of Fate 1 and 2 and really took the ball and ran with it in a much better way, by just kind of making it short and sweet, by not trying to add crazy extra gameplay mechanics that just contradict from what a deck building card game really should be. Whereas Hand of Fate feels like it is just this odd experiment that fails on many factors to be a cohesive, fun game. Sometimes I would blame that as being a case where maybe they tested the game to death, and they'd been playing it for 3 to 8 years, and they got so good at the game that they were just turning up the difficulty. It would be a massive improvement if they just turned down the difficulty quite a bit. Reduce the amount of damage players took by 10 to 50%, or have an easy mode that would do that. The random encounters and what they call gambits, however, are still a major problem. Like, one of them is you'll see 4 cards and you just have to pick a card, any card, and some of the cards will be success, some of the cards will be failure. I have, in probably 30 hours of gameplay, found no way to actually get good at doing that random gambit. Other random gambits are rolling dice. There are some cheat mechanics sometimes if you have a certain equipment card or blessing that might increase your dice final count, but really there's only 2, maybe 3 of those, and that only helps you so far. And there's really only one thing I've seen that actually helps with the pick a card, any card. There was also a precision swinging metronome minigame that is not used well enough. It is probably the most strategic of the encounters, of the gambits, and so if you could decide to only do precision swinging on the metronome, you probably should decide that one. But that is still a timing skill based gameplay mechanic, when really Hand of Fate should be a competitor to more of a strategy based game. It definitely should be coming more from the dice roll realm if you're going to add any randomization to it. That probably is one thing I like about collectible card games, is very rarely, well, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a few dice rolls, but almost every other card game barely ever uses dice rolls or never uses dice rolls. It is all strategy all the time, which I definitely would prefer that. I don't need random luck affecting the outcome of my gameplay in almost all cases. And if a game does have luck, and it's a video game, I particularly expect it to cheat in my favor and make the dice roll 6s more often than they roll 1s, which does not feel like the case. It definitely feels like it is a fair set of dice, not weighted in any direction when you roll the dice in Hand of Fate 2. Otherwise, I guess I don't have too much to say about it. I'm just continuing to play it. Probably by this time on Friday, which I might not stream on Friday. I'll just throw that out there that I might be too busy, or the time I stream on Friday might be very weird. There is also some thoughts that even Thursday I might want to do a Steam Summer Sale shopping stream instead. I've done those in the past. I don't know if they really benefit anybody to look at games and shop that way, but I could see also not streaming it and just doing that privately. I could go through my follow list at the same time. I probably do need to do a major amount of follow list cleanup, if not going through every thing on the file list A through Z, maybe just going through everything M through Z or A through M, every sale or every big sale. That would make a lot of sense to do. But yeah. What I imagine I'd like to see if I was going to stream shopping on a Steam sale is, at some theoretical future point, if I was actually successful as a YouTuber, that we would be getting like super chats from people, or at least I'd be getting suggestions from people on the chat as to what games to buy, and getting the criticism and consumer advice that I usually give by playing games, circling back from other gamers when we're talking about old games on Steam, to see and take the temperature of who is interested in what games in particular. For instance, those EA games, the Command and Conquer games that they just stealthily released on Friday, I think it was. Like, those, I've heard, look like they are just DOSBox good old games that they've just flooded Steam with. Which in this case, I can't blame EA for bringing their games to Steam, even if they put them all at the same time with no fanfare. I wonder if this isn't a case where even EA, who would have special rules and regulations, or a special contract with Steam, maybe they are going to get some pressure. Maybe they're starting to get pressure from Steam to not have games that don't support Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 8.1. And it might be a case that some of these DOSBox games are just increasingly getting less likely to run in Windows 10 and Windows 11, since that's the only systems that those are the only systems that Steam supports as far as Windows goes. Or it could just be nothing like that. It could just be random EA wanted a few extra sales this quarter. Because EA put all those games out on Friday, there was one YouTuber talking about how a small independent developer had launched their game on that same Friday and been completely drowned out by EA just flooding the Steam new and trending feed on the front page. Which, yeah, at a certain level it's unfair. I have said multiple times, I think even companies like EA have no reason that they should be allowed to list more than one game a week. EA could have certainly once per week put out one of its old games and released it that way. There is definitely a problem where there's just a lot of dumping going on in the river that is Steam, and a lot of intentional and I think often unintentional flooding of games on the Steam new and trending feeds. So yeah, of course that's also a great way to just play the victim and have an excuse why your indie game, which probably wouldn't have made it to the new and trending feed anyways, isn't making it to the new and trending feed. But yeah, particularly the EA games like the Saboteur and the Command and Conquer. If I was to do a live stream, if I was more successful, if I was capable of even receiving super chats where people are saying, here's $1, go buy this $1 game, that'd all be helpful. That would be way more helpful than trying to run ads. Like, ideally, I can't really promise that I wouldn't run ads on my channel if I could. I almost certainly would run ads, but I try to keep it minimal, and ideally, if people just did support me through Patreon to the point where it was just paying and meeting all my needs, I would disable ads completely on my channel. because I know nobody likes ads on YouTube, except for AdSense and YouTube and Google themselves. Nobody wants to see those. And as a content creator, I know that with every ad, there's a percentage of people who will just get bored and leave instead of sitting through the ad to continue to watch your video, which that's not helpful. But yeah, if it were going to be a Patreon thing, it would have to be just consistent, significant amounts of donors. And it really couldn't even be like just one rich person, because that one rich person at any point could go away. People can certainly friend me on Steam and gift me games, and that's happened before, and then I never really got around to playing the game that it was gifted, which that's my fault 100% of the time. Yeah, I have plenty of games on Steam. Almost everybody does. And so I am still very much looking and thinking that I want to buy a Steam Deck during the summer sale. I probably, though, can't afford the OLED version I'd like to get, and the refurbs seem to be so out of stock that just getting a cheap LCD might be the option, and then hoping that maybe a second generation of Steam Deck comes around in 3 to 5 years and has major improvement. Although I don't know what that major improvement is really going to be. The Steam Deck is very delicately balanced between its battery life, which is still kind of low, and its processing power, CPU and GPU processing power. Like adding things like Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 7 to a new Steam Deck is going to just run up the price unnecessarily, although a Steam Deck is about the one device that Wi-Fi 7, Wi-Fi 6E does make sense on. That really should just be a separate upgrade that the user could do to switch out the Wi-Fi card, like any other laptop can do. The more RAM or faster RAM, take your pick. You really would only get one on a Steam Deck 2, a theoretical Steam Deck 2, and I imagine you would want faster RAM than you would want more RAM, more than you would want more RAM, because the Steam Deck is going to uniquely be in a situation where you're not really going to multitask in SteamOS on Linux on a Steam Deck. You're going to have one game running. You're not going to have Firefox running in the background with 100 tabs, or more accurately, it would probably be Iceweasel running in the background with 100 tabs. So faster RAM probably would be your upgrade. There. Getting higher Bluetooth connectivity probably doesn't matter. I still kind of question if a cheaper Steam Deck wouldn't be the better target. That's certainly where Valve was leaning to, is that they thought even starting at the $250 price point was a little high. And the demand was definitely went in the other direction, wanting OLED versions at $550. But yeah, I think a cheaper version that doesn't have controls, buttons on it, and triggers might be something to consider. I don't know how you really call that a Steam Deck at that point, instead of just calling it a Steam tablet. It could be a Steam tablet with just a touchscreen or with just touchpads. They're really committed to the touchpads. If anything, I think they could lose the touchpads, and maybe that would be a way of keeping it cheap. But yeah. For a lot of people, if you have a spare monitor or TV, the features of portability could go out the window. You could take out the battery. You could make something that would just be a console, that would be a Steam Deck, but just doesn't have a screen, doesn't have a battery, doesn't have the controls built into it. That would be very useful. I definitely could see myself gifting a console that was a SteamOS console to people if it was really, really cheap. Alright, well, we're gonna die either way, so we might as well activate this ability, even though it's not gonna work. Yeah, just a portable tablet screen though probably is a mistake. I could see them making different versions of the Steam Deck for different fans. Like, I definitely could see myself not really caring so much about having touchpads, and if they just had more of a layout that was in line with how an Xbox controller was lined up, I think that would work for me fairly well. Trying to save some time here by skipping some steps, and there is a better way to play this. I got, as I was increasingly just being frustrated with Hand of Fate 2, I took a moment to do, I took over an hour really to do one of the Cracking the Cryptics Sudoku puzzles, and they have a link where you can do the Sudokus and follow along, and it goes to a app called Sudoku Pad by Spin, which is not any of the Cracking the Cryptic games on Steam. Sudoku Pad is on Steam, and it weirdly is different, and I think is probably better than the Cracking the Cryptic games. So, seems kind of ridiculous that they would make their own app, and it would be worse than Spin's Sudoku Pad. It might be a case that the Spin Sudoku Pad is designed more for people designing Sudoku puzzles as much as for people solving Sudoku puzzles. So maybe that's the thought. Although I kind of just question if there is really a thought there. See, I really haven't been watching any streaming TV lately, which is probably a good thing, because that's another way to certainly waste a lot of time. Let's see if we can win from this move. I'm still swinging between insomnia and hypersomnia, so I'm sleeping in weird times and sleeping quite a lot. But yeah, the most thing I've been doing has just been spending way too much time playing Hand of Fate 2, which this is a reoccurring issue, is I keep playing longer running games when a dumb, easy to make run and gun first person shooter game would probably be the right move as far as the kind of game to make, and I mean the kind of game to play next as far as footage to make. So looking at the Twitter feeds here to see if we're seeing any more news, and while I'm doing this I'm also failing miserably to play. He's played 3 of these Phantom Knights fogs. Okay, so big news here from Gamatsu. The Prince of Persia The Lost Crown post-launch content roadmap has been announced. This isn't actually big news, but this is one of the things I saw we wanted to talk about. So, a Warrior's Path is being added for free in March. A boss attack is being added for free in spring. Divine Trails are being added for free in summer, and then later in 2024, new story DLC, which I suspect means that isn't actually free. Now I'd assume each of these screenshots are part of the free bundle here, and not separate things that would cost money. Inherently, though, the Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, it should get as much support and updates to make it as good of a game as it should have been, but it really should have been as good of a game as it should have been at launch. It's a great example of a game that seems like it was rushed out for not really good reason. With all the layoffs recently, it seems like a lot of games may have been rushed to be released just so they could then lay off a lot of the QA staff and a lot of the people who worked and developed those games. But yeah, unless they were releasing Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown early to get it out of the way of the Sands of Time remake getting in a release date and being released really close to that release date, it does seem like Ubisoft could have just never even announced Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown until all of this free DLC was released. Ubisoft, I think in particular, has been very heavy in the past decade or two around the ideas of season passes, DLC, all of the kind of awful monetization nonsense that were big deals recently, and seems like Ubisoft in this case in particular is showing a great example of where all of that content really should have just been there day one. You don't really get a lot of benefit by keeping people playing or getting people to go back and play a single player game. So I would just assume that that content was just not finished. And I would also assume that Ubisoft would have just canceled that content had the initial sales of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown been low enough, which is probably what we'll see up for the likes of Suicide Squad and possibly Skull and Bones. I'm hearing rumors or seeing rumors that Skull and Bones may have sold even less than Suicide Squad did. And this isn't video game related, but I'm also hearing rumors that the TNT show, The Librarians, the TV version, TV series of it, is getting a sequel series, The Librarians Next Generation, and it's going to air on CW, which, yeah, that might make some sense, really. With Supernatural gone and The Flash and the Arrowverse series all gone, CW has very, very little to offer. And I have thought that they were going to potentially just abandon the channel. But I don't know if there's anybody that even really wants to buy TV channels now. So they may be just stuck with it. AT&T may be stuck with it. Warner Brothers may be stuck with it. You would think that the CW would be the place that at the very least was just constantly re-airing old CW movies, but they kind of don't. Or Warner Brothers movies. Like the Suicide Squad movies, of which there are multiples of those, could be airing on a near weekly basis. The old Batman movies, particularly, could be re-airing on a near weekly basis. I potentially would argue that they maybe should just rebrand the CW as being partially a DC exclusive channel promoting DC comics and promoting DC movies, and then whatever other kinds of TV shows that Warner Brothers has, you could try and merge all of that together too into the channel. But yeah, that has nothing to do with video games. Let's move on. Gamatsu also says that Crypt of the Necrodancer's DLC Synchrony is now available for the PS4, Switch, and PC. I have no rhythm, unfortunately, so I would never be able to play Crypt of the Necrodancer. But despite my own personal disability or lack of ability there, I would say Crypt of the Necrodancer was talked about more than enough to make it relevant still, even though I would also potentially argue that there is not that many I don't think there's that many people these days talking about Crypt of the Necrodancer. Okay. Let's just end the turn there, I guess. Yet another game here has been delisted due to a rating snafu, which seems to me like either the game companies are getting worse about getting their games rated correctly, or they are the ratings boards themselves are getting worse. This time we have this from GameDeveloper.com. A game called Berserk Boy has been delisted from the European Nintendo eShop, which my fear here is that while we may be moving away from cancel culture effectively working for a while, which, yeah, that'll probably pop up in another 150 years, just like the Salem witch trials and witch hunts and inquisitions popped up. We may unfortunately be moving towards just a new problem of everyone trying to, video game companies and corporations in particular, trying to depict themselves as victims, innocent victims, and trying to get it, instead of trying to convince people to cancel people, they're trying to convince people to care or have concern about people, or about the games. It's so we may very well be moving towards victimization culture, which is something that people have accused a lot of people of, and sometimes rightfully, I think, and sometimes I think often inaccurately or wrongly. Seriously? But yeah. That is, I guess, in a lot of ways, you could say the cost of doing business is to make sure who you're working with and who you're partnering with are doing things correctly. And at a certain point, I don't think you can just blame, say a company is blameless due to a rating snafu, because I think there is probably a case here where they are just not filling out the forms correctly, they're not putting in the right information for the ratings boards, or maybe even the ratings boards are intentionally making mistakes so that people will pay the ratings boards to assist them or get refiling fees. You would hope that isn't the case, but it's not impossible, certainly. There is kind of a known issue where if you are in certain countries and you are a soldier trying to get a driver's license in that country, the DMVs of that local country will just intentionally fail you multiple times on stupid reasons so they can get the most amount of money possible out of you, just screwing over the foreigner. So there definitely are cases where institutions that are designed to do one thing due to greed and capitalism become corrupt and start to do something completely different. Alright, I think we can win here. I think we should win here. Video Games Chronicle says the Summer Game Fest 2024 has confirmed a June date. Fans can sign up for information on attending the event. It will be the Summer Games Fest is kind of the sister to the Video Game Awards from Jeff Keighley. Feeling, I think, a little bit more like it's going to have a focus on trailers and being more like E3. It's going to happen on June 7th. I still feel like maybe the Video Game Awards should happen in the summer, giving awards for what happened in the previous year, because there really has just been not a lot of new games between December 31st and now, March 13th. So that downtime could have been times in which you could have encouraged people who were going to maybe do a people's vote. And yeah, I could see even a People's Choice Awards being part of the Summer Game Fest, and then the Video Game Awards being the Oscars and Emmys equivalent, where games are reviewed and given awards based on a jury of mainstream video game critics. But yeah, I don't think anybody needs the E3 experience as it was. I don't think anybody really ever needed it after the point where it became open to the public. Once the internet and directs started being a thing where you could just watch Xbox Directs and Nintendo Directs and PlayStation Directs, and you can have press releases and news come out at any time, having an E3 or Summer Game Fest makes less sense. And I definitely feel that because I'm not really watching any of these events anymore. I don't care enough to waste the time on it. I get the gist of it just from press releases and other people, video game journalists just reporting on it. They often just put out trailers that have no actual gameplay in them. So yeah. The biggest problem with things like E3 and the Summer Game Fest too is that you watch 10 trailers and maybe you'll remember one game. And maybe you're only going to remember that game for 2 or 3 weeks before you forget it. So I'd much prefer trailers to come out just a couple weeks before the game is actually available for purchase, and then focus on that one game. I'd also like to see a lot more games try to be released in the first quarter of 2024. That's something I guess maybe Valve could be helpful with, is if there was some special incentive they could do where independent games would have sales next fests in January, February, and March. They probably were some next fests, but yeah. It's too late to put the genie back in the bottle, but I could see saying that Steam Direct games could only be released in January, February, and March, in the first quarter of the year. That you could pay $100 and have your game listed, but it was only in that time frame, and you just have to wait 8 months otherwise. If you miss that first quarter of the year. And then the rest of the time of the year, people would have to have real publishers. Now, that's not very libertarian to have a rule like that, but it would separate things out quite a bit. Squishing in all Steam Direct releases into 3 months, showing after the first year how much competition really happens, discouraging the people who are just making asset flip garbage games from bothering to release games. Particularly if you are running a scam on Steam and releasing asset flip garbage games to money launder, that kind of scam only works if you can consistently make money on the game and have the game sell, and consistently put out new games to compete with the other new games. This will be the last game we play. We've gotten lucky here at the end. But once again, it does feel like we're going to spend a lot of time working up the Duelist rank. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com says that Playdate games can now be written in Swift. If I recall correctly, Swift, I think, is... Let's see. Swift may be the visual programming language from Apple, or it may be just a different programming language from Apple. it is not a programming language that I particularly would recommend anybody learn. Particularly if it is the visual programming language, where it's just dragging Legos left and right. That concept visually doesn't even line up with the way you'd make a Unreal Engine or Unity game with the blocks concept. Because when you are doing something visually to connect objects in Unreal or Unity, you aren't actually doing the core programming there at all. You're just connecting what are, I guess, tokenized away more advanced concepts in favor of using little blocks and pictures. The Playdate I still feel like is a dumb device, and it's kind of crazy that people are still talking about it. What is also I find a little interesting to take from this, as far as what mainstream video game journalism is talking about, we have had people talking about Stellar Blade with its trailer, partially I think because it has PlayStation funding and is coming to the PlayStation, whereas Shift Up's previous game that they still are supporting, Nike Goddess of Victory, is doing like a full-on crossover event that was just announced, and nobody's going to talk about that at all. Nobody has talked about Nike Goddess of Victory as a mobile game at all in the first place. It is comparing a mobile game to a console game, but both games have that feeling of lewdness that is unique to Shift Up, and both games are from the same company with the same support from Tencent and, well, PlayStation may be supporting Stellar Blade more. And so it may actually not be a case of censorship at all. So I don't want to immediately cry censorship, although it is suspiciously looking like censorship. It may be a case that Sony is just paying a lot of money to advertise the Stellar Blade game. And since Sony isn't involved with Nike Goddess of Victory, they're not doing that. I also imagine Stellar Blade as a console game is not going to have any major crossover events. There'll probably be some costumes that unlock, and that's about it. I would also say Stellar Blade's demo being leaked early, and then the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 deleting that demo from people who had already downloaded its hard drive highlights a very concerning possibility that I imagine most people knew that they probably could do that Sony could probably have done that at any point. The fact that they're willing to pull the trigger on a demo seems like that was a dangerous and dumb decision on their part, because now you've shaken confidence. Like they literally did the nuclear option and nuked a demo, and they could have just left the people who downloaded it keep the demo. It wouldn't have really affected anything. Okay. See if we can pull something out special here and win in this turn. That didn't work. We can't use that as material. I've managed to sleep wrong, I think, on my shoulder, and so my shoulder's been hurting lately too. I wonder if some of that is just poor posture with how I'm holding the mouse too. Alright, well that'll be our last of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. And so that's the end of the pre-show effectively. Yeah, and I don't have any way to really satisfy an audience who would just want the show to end here, or want me to just keep on playing Yu-Gi-Oh! There's no reason to play Yu-Gi-Oh! It's unreasonable, frankly, to play more than an hour every 2 or 3 days. We've made a massive amount of progress here as far as the Duelist Cup. We've already accomplished a lot of this daily quest. Actually, there is a little bit more daily quest, so I guess there is a justification in this case. I don't think I collected the Duel Live before. Yeah. Alright, we'll play one game over here and see what happens there, and play one more game. GameDeveloper.com has an obituary here for Terry Hess, an Obsidian artist. So here we have a zoomed in picture of the person, which for an obituary I guess is fine, although this wild hair, unkempt hair style arguably should be, you should have a slightly better looking photo of yourself at all times. And the cropping here seems weird, certainly, too. This is way too zoomed in. Terry Hess was a long-time environment artist for Obsidian Entertainment. He passed away last week. The developer, that would be Obsidian Entertainment, has launched a GoFundMe whose funds will solely go to the late artist's family. Why can't the developer either have life insurance that they were paying for all of their employees, which is what should be required by all employers if they are going to be involved in underpaying people, which is what's really going on there as far as any benefit, health insurance, life insurance. Theoretically, it is way better if businesses were not in charge of what kind of life insurance or health insurance you get, or any other kind of benefit like that, and they were just instead actually paying much more money that they should be paying. But that's not, unfortunately, the capitalistic world that most people in the United States live in. So, yeah. The idea of making a GoFundMe and then tweeting it out so that gamers, once again, are being asked to bear the burden of what an employer should have been funding is ridiculous. And I guess the good news on this is that we don't see that happen very often. Like, this may be, frankly, the first time I've ever seen it actually occur, where a company has tried to has started a GoFundMe. Inherently, I don't think GoFundMes work as well as you'd like them to. If people have needs, they probably have consistent reoccurring needs. And I feel like a GoFundMe with a good story might be funded fairly well, but I feel like a significant number of them also just fail with getting no funding. And even the ones that do get funded well, often I don't think would address the reoccurring needs and issues. in this case, Terry has, if he is the major income provider of the family, unless you were going to subscribe consistently on a monthly basis to GoFundMe, the family is going to get a boost of income for a brief time, and then people will stop funding that. Has first worked on 3D environment as a 3D environment artist for Black Ops Entertainment and Manifest Games in the mid-2000s. In 2005, he joined Treyarch, where he worked on Spider-Man 3, which wouldn't be a recent Spider-Man 3 game, it would be an older Spider-Man 3, and 007 Quantum of Solace in 2010's Call of Duty Black Ops, which I have no idea if 2010's Call of Duty Black Ops is the one of the good ones, although it doesn't really matter in an obituary case. From 2010 to 2012, he stayed in the military shooter realm. After working on DICE's Medal of Honor Warfighter, he joined Visceral Games and EA Montreal on Army of Two: The Devil's Cartel, which, yeah, I don't think that one sold very well. In 2013, he started at Obsidian with its free-to-play game Armored Warfare. He was later assigned to the team working on The Outer Worlds as an environment art lead. Obsidian deemed Hest as one of the many contributors to the early demo to publish their private division. The demo helped the team hone its in on a game's look, and it is still a meeting that gets talked about with our colleagues at Private Division this day. Wow, how boring is your life that you're talking about a meeting that happened years ago? We're talking about a meeting that happened even a few weeks ago. This is quite a long obituary, but it's also mostly just talking about where he worked. What really sucks about this in these obituaries is that we are not really getting any commentary around what he did outside of work, particularly in this one. Like, we're not being told if he's leaving behind a wife or a husband or children, one child, two child, parents, anything like that. Not being told what he did on the weekends or as a hobby, what his away from work passions might have been. It is certainly a case that this is an obituary and a GoFundMe that is being put out overly proactive by Obsidian, which once again just highlights how Obsidian should be doing something more effective than just putting out an obituary, such as paying for the kids' college or having a life insurance policy to start with. There's a real good argument to have free, just by default, life insurance policies on all of your employees if you're an employer. Because at the very least, what you don't want to have happen is have the family showing up at the business asking for handouts, making the business look bad for underpaying him, which inevitably they would be underpaying him. Can we win? I probably shouldn't leave that in the graveyard, but probably not a terrible move either. do we activate a spell? Let's see. We can, I think, normal summon another monster, activate a spell card 3 times, activate a trap card 3 times. I see why I'm not activating spells or trap cards. Here is that I'm placing the cards, but by the time but then the opponent is destroying them. So we'll play one more time. On his GoFundMe page, Obsidian recalled Hess as someone who anyone from any department could talk to. He was warm, welcoming, and a fantastic mentor. His loss was felt for a long time and will be impossible to replace. He will be missed greatly. He does also, from the looks of him, look like he is an older generation game developer. Yeah. Mid-2000s. I mean, he's not super old. He's not original Nintendo Miyamoto old, who's probably in his 70s or 80s. But yeah, mid-2000s, you're talking somebody who would have been at least 20 years in the business. And increasingly, it seems like with layoffs, we're going to lose people like that, either because they die or they get frustrated with the industry and leave. That is one thing that unions are going to try to push to correct. If there's one thing about unions that is fairly consistent, is the concept of seniority and the concept of people keeping their jobs until they retire at 65. So you start working at a car assembly plant at 16. If it's a union job, you might be there when you're 65. And that's really important in a lot of cases where a lot of times when there is a union job, there aren't any better jobs or any other options at all available in the area. Of course, that causes a problem when the factory closed down and then the entire city is worthless because there's no jobs in the city. But yeah, I do think that we need to maintain some mix of the older style gamers. Otherwise, you're going to end up with too many people who've worked on games like Fortnite, or too many people who've worked on mobile games that have microtransactions and DLC, and that's just going to be their perspective and their experience from day one, and the game developers will then push the game the way games are made more than demand really is going to push the way games are made, because supply and demand is pretty much a lie, at least in the game industry, and I think in most industries, because there are very much a lot of opinionated gamers out there who would want different types of games and are not getting it. Nobody is clamoring for microtransactions and predatory monetization. And yet, if you even try to make the argument that supply and demand is a lie, then you'll have a lot of video game companies come out and then throw out the other platitude that people vote with their dollars. And to a certain extent that is true, but a lot of people are voting with their dollars by not buying these bad games, and then the companies will just come out with another excuse. If corporations were run by artificial intelligence accountants that were just running the numbers and legitimately considering sales instead of manipulating the numbers to fit whatever narrative they want to push, often to just appease shareholders and raise the stock value based on nothing and speculation, instead of raising the stock value based on the actual sales of games and the actual reception of games, then a lot of those concepts would actually work. But it's just not the case. The CEO is effectively a monster full of ego that we could sometimes call human, but you might as well not. That what they want to do goes. That's how they got to be the boss in the first place, is by bossing people around and living in a reality distortion field of some level. The CEOs that are actually running the numbers and making conservative predictions get ousted by the investors, and who want massive speculative predictions and want the CEOs to talk about things like NFTs and cryptocurrency and whatever the next fad is, AI nowadays. This Twitter feed I subscribe to, Game Jobs Direct, is asking people to sign up and register if you're seeking a job in the game industries. They have 2,600 jobs listed, which is probably not that many, but then a lot of those jobs might be the same job filled many times over. I would still imagine that you probably would do better to be on LinkedIn also, but yeah. Let's see what the page looks like here as far as looking for jobs go. Doesn't say yet. 2,687 jobs by default. Once you started to put in keywords and regions, those numbers are going to drop very quickly. I definitely also feel like colleges have always done a very poor job as far as assisting their graduates to have the skills to actually get hired, particularly in programming and video game development. And yeah, in particular, I think everybody can agree colleges have done an absolute awful job about warning people to drop out and give up if there are literally only 2,000 jobs and there's going to be 200,000 people applying to those jobs, and you're making potentially a D+ in programming in a college class. They don't ever sit people down and say, you need to be realistic here. You're not making the cut. You're not good enough, or you're not in the right region, which is often another thing. And inherently, professors themselves have no idea how to apply for jobs. A professor would have applied for a job to be a professor very likely decades earlier in a completely different type of way, in a completely different type of environment. And the amount of competition to be a professor in a college is extremely low because there's extremely few people who have PhDs or working on PhDs, which is who they want to hire in a college. Yeah. Most college professors have not spent significant amounts of time, if any time, actually working in the industry they're teaching about. Take note, Larry Herb and aka Major Nelson and the former CEO of Nintendo, Reggie Fils-Aimé, and I guess so far we haven't seen what the Bobby Kotick will do, leaving the game industry. let's ignore Bobby Kotick for a second. Both Larry Herb and Major Nelson are Major Nelson, Larry Herb, and Reggie Fils-Aimé, those two people by 3 different names. Both of them have left the industry and really not done anything else. They haven't tried to effectively teach a class or become an educator for the next generation of people who would work in the game industry. I think Bill Gates maybe teaches like 1 class, and that's about it. Some of the former presidents, I think maybe Barack Obama teaches 1 class at some college. But you definitely don't see a lot of that. And as far as politicians teaching classes, that's very different from video game executives teaching classes. I doubt Miyamoto is teaching classes as far as how to make video games. They may come in and give speeches, and that's about it. There was that whole website service masterclass. It was supposed to be more around that idea of people teaching from their experience, from their skills. But I don't think masterclass really went anywhere either. I think it was too expensive and too much of a time commitment as a concept. This will definitely be the last game we play. We're still not really activating spells or traps. Video Games Chronicle says that Saber Interactive has removed references to Embracer from its site, suggesting it has been sold. This might simply be a preparation to it being sold. Now, notably, this background art could just be they changed the art slightly. It's the same otherwise, and I would say the white on black is more striking than the white with a background of something. Looks like a giant snail shell or something. But yeah, at this point, that is an article that is reporting on a rumor that said that Saber was up for sale for $500 million, possibly buying itself its own freedom for $500 million, which I believe Saber Interactive was bought by Embracer for several billion. So, yeah. Oh, I almost wonder, could you run a company like Embracer and then get a bunch of investors to give you funding to buy a bunch of companies that would have been under the control of, let's say, Microsoft. Let's say Microsoft was way more nefarious than we thought it was, and they were just making ZeniMax and Double Fine miserable and not letting them make the games they wanted to make or make any games at all. Could you then make a company like Embracer to buy ZeniMax, to buy Double Fine, to then bankrupt that Embracer company, to then free ZeniMax and Double Fine? I don't know. I think that there would be some major fraud if you got caught doing that. Not acting in the shareholders' best interest effectively, although that might be very difficult to prove. And I don't know if that really helps that much either, because I feel like Double Fine and ZeniMax, as example companies owned by Microsoft, probably don't want to just be independent companies. They probably can't afford it. They may want to be independent, come to think of it, but they probably just can't afford it. They need the likes of Microsoft or some other publisher to fund the advertisement and development of their games. And Microsoft has deep pockets, certainly. Of course, that speculation or that example doesn't really make a lot of sense. I see Loxy, which is a palindrome, says hello on the chat. Hello. So I still didn't activate enough spell and trap cards to get these rewards, but whatever. I'm not willing to play any more of Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Arika's vice president has shared an image of a mysterious Mega Man design. Fans don't recognize the Mega Man helmet shown off by Ichiro Mihara, which I don't know if that really means anything, because this could have just been a concept art thing, or this could be a teaser of a new Mega Man game. I kind of wish I could get into Mega Man, but also I just don't think I could do anything other than play a rebooted series of Mega Man. It would have to be a much more modern game, a fairly easy platforming game, a fairly easy boss fighting game, or it would have to be Battle.net based, and that would feel a little weird for what I expect from a Mega Man game. Mega Man as a series just really passed me by, and it's definitely an old enough series that it's hard to justify trying to get into it now. I certainly don't think I could tolerate playing Mega Man 1 or 2, or probably the first 6 games, maybe the first dozen games. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says that Epic has now confirmed its new Unreal Engine pricing, keeping its promise not to change it for game developers. This is a long-term follow-up from the Unreal controversy, and in fairness, there is no one outwardly outraged still talking about the outrage of the Unreal Engine. So they have just weathered that storm pretty well as they're going to. But I do think there is a significant number of people who are thinking now to either make their games on the Godot engine instead of the Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine in particular didn't have as much controversy as it made this announcement after the Unity engine changed the pricing scheme. So both Unreal Engine and Unity engine have changed their pricing schemes, at least for non-game users, to what I think are seat-based licensing models, meaning you have to pay for a license for every single person using it instead of per computer it's installed on, or maybe about the same thing. Inherently, the Unreal Engine still is the default engine if you want to make a first-person shooter game that looks really realistic and you don't have an internal engine you want to use. But if you want an open source engine, you would go with the Godot engine, but the game is more likely to come out like a Unity game and a mobile game than it is a hyper-realistic first-person shooter Unreal Engine game. Yeah, and I don't think I really want to get too much into the weeds of this. There is much bigger news around Epic anyways, as far as are they actually going to get Fortnite back on iPhones, and is that going to really matter? At least in Europe, will they get Fortnite back on iPhones? And as a non-Fortnite player, I certainly would like to see if Epic could just do something else that would interest me. It is a lot of blah from Unreal Engine and Epic. Every time they announce something about Fortnite, I don't care about. Every time they announce something about the Epic Game Store that I don't really care about. the fact that the Epic Game Store really is still in terrible shape after years is a problem. And yes, every now and then they'll show off their nanite 3D ray tracing stuff, and that looks really interesting, but it'll be years before anybody could probably put the nanite technology into the ray tracing pipeline of new games. And more than likely you're going to need a 5000 series or a 6000 series NVIDIA graphics card to even be able to really use it. We really have plateaued as far as quality even for PC gamers, and that's why you see the likes of the Steam Deck, which is doing just good enough, pushing 30 to 60 frames on a, I think it's like a 720 screen, somewhere between 720 and 1080 p resolution screen. That's good enough for most gamers these days. And yeah, so I would like to see Epic in particular get rid of Tim Sweeney being in charge. Just have him retire, see someone else come in with some new fresh ideas, and just a less aggressive way of dealing with other companies, at least publicly. And I guess I would really love if the Unreal Engine went open source, but they would never do that. And so otherwise, I would be way more interested in seeing the Godot engine succeed, or some new engine come out that was a real competitor to the Unreal Engine, because Unity really wasn't even a great competitor to the Unreal Engine anyways. Moving on, Gamatsu says that Resident Evil 4 remake sales have topped 7 million. This still doesn't look like Leon with this haircut to me, but whatever. I did see a YouTuber talk about the Resident Evil 4 remake. Well, more he was talking about Resident Evil 5, actually, pushing for a Resident Evil 5 remake. Which, yeah, there apparently is something at the very end of Resident Evil 4's one of the DLCs that is hinting that a Resident Evil 5 remake of some sort will happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it's fairly different, if the appearance and the actual characters involved in Resident Evil 5 are different. I could see them not bothering to bring Sheva back because they never did anything with Sheva. I could see them making Sheva the only character in the story and getting rid of Chris Redfield as a companion co-op character. I could see them getting rid of the concept of co-op in particular, which was heavily pushed in Resident Evil 5. And that was yet another game gimmick that was popular at the time and just didn't make any sense at all in the Resident Evil series. I could see them making a game called Resident Evil 5 that doesn't take place in Africa and tells a completely different story or a very similar story. And inherently, regardless of what they do with a Resident Evil 5 remake, then they have to consider what they're going to do to remake Resident Evil 6, which that in itself is going to be neat just to start over from scratch. What would make a lot of sense is if in Resident Evil 5 it was just a completely different branching storyline and they tell a completely different story, which leads to Resident Evil 6 being a completely different story, which then leads in nicely into Resident Evil 7. I'm still not sure if this Overwatch 2 and Cowboy Bebop collab is real, but this is a follow-up from something I talked about on Monday's stream, in that they have this, I've seen this and I'm not sure if this is fan art or not, and it just seems really weird. The animation style here feels off. I haven't watched Cowboy Bebop in a while, but she doesn't have robot legs, for instance. This lady doesn't. I can't remember the name. This guy, I don't think has a gun like that, or quite looks like that. I don't know if he has a robot arm. So, in robot legs, it looks like again. So, it looks like what happens in Overwatch is that you just become robotified. This guy is way bigger than I think he's ever been depicted before, and he has robot arms. I kind of feel like what's happening here maybe is a case of them skinning existing characters with Cowboy Bebop. And then the big picture here, let's see if we can click on this and maybe get this a little bit better. Nope, that doesn't really make it any bigger. Is you have this little girl character, Ed, in Cowboy Bebop, who is way younger and shorter in Cowboy Bebop than she is being depicted here. And certainly more mature. You look at the hands and there's like blue long fingernails. That's weird. The face here is more drawn out, and yeah, you're getting like an 18-year-old teenager appearance on Ed, when Ed as a character was depicted very much like a 10-year-old hacker character. Where's the other foot? Can't even find it. Yeah, so it's way over here. That's why. So yeah, she's got a stuffed dog toy. And see, there was a whole plotline element there where Ed was just a prepubescent girl that the rest of the crew of the Cowboy Bebop basically adopted her and didn't even know if she was a girl or a boy, and it really didn't matter to the storyline. So it just seems really old to age her up, really odd to age her up, particularly when you consider that Overwatch is the notorious game that is so easy to take models out of it and then make 3D CGI porn from. So you have canonically a storyline character that's like 10, who's now been aged to look older, that is going to have a 3D model in a system that is probably going to end up in some Rule 34 porn online because of that. I don't know why there was such a large amount of that online from Overwatch, other than some of the Overwatch main characters are kind of interesting looking. A couple of them are. But overall, the Overwatch 2 game has, I think, lost most people's attention. And now they're doing a collab with an anime that hasn't aired anything new in probably 10 to 15 years. I know there was a movie for Cowboy Bebop that came out, but without spoiling anything, there is a beginning and a middle and an end to the Cowboy anime series, and there isn't a lot of room to add anything else. Come to think of it, I'm trying to see if I actually have Cowboy Bebop on my shelf of anime to the left of me on my bookshelves. No, I don't think I ever bought it. It was one of those ones that was always on Adult Swim, and I never got around to it in favor of buying things that I hadn't seen otherwise. I have what is effectively very similar to Cowboy Bebop, Outlaw Star, on my shelves, and that would be right where Cowboy Bebop should be if I owned it because my shelves are organized based on genre in a system I made for myself, where things are not alphabetical at all, and what it is things that generally are more PG or G or E for everyone are on the left side, and things that are more extreme tend to be on the right side. Yeah, and that's only in groupings, because then there's also some series that have very PG spin-offs, and then there's some series that have spin-offs that are also not that are in for mature. Oh My Goddess versus Oh My Goddess. Almost nobody needs to or would even be able to watch Oh My Goddess, OH, but Oh My Goddess is fairly PG, and then has a lot of spin-offs like The Adventures of the Mini Goddesses, which is G, so the ratings are inconsistent at best. Yeah, unless my system is out of order. I don't think I ever did buy Cowboy Bebop. And yeah, this just feels like a weird collab. In particular, Ed was a hacker character that never shot a gun or fought anybody. So, and didn't really run or leave the ship at all. Moving on. So, still not sure if that really is a collab or if that is just fan art, but it is at least a possibility. A Pokemon Works subsidiary has been launched within the Diamond and Pearl remake developers. So they made a new subsidiary. The question, I guess, is just going to come down to whether they're going to work on something new, or maybe that fabled remake that people still want from the Pokemon series is going to be worked on from that new subsidiary. This is very much inside baseball type news that could mean anything at all. Let's see, what was I going to show off about the Epic Games Store? Not Genshin Impact. Although Genshin Impact is like the one of maybe 2 or 3 mobile games that are getting some promotion. In part, I think that's because Genshin Impact is, I think, cross-platform and is on the Epic Games Store. As another follow-up, I talked about this All Things Wicked Dead by Daylight DLC when this latest chapter was announced, and I said this character looked very intriguing, and this monster looked kind of interesting, and I tried to research and figure out where it was from, because I thought it was some kind of license thing, and it isn't. It's a totally original, as far as I can tell, character design and concept for Dead by Daylight, which I'm still not sure if this character even has a name. You'd think that if you were going to make something original, you might want to promote it more, but Dead by Daylight is in this weird position where they are just trying to keep players playing their multiplayer game. They're not trying to make a solo player game that could sell for years down the line. It is kind of crazy to make a multiplayer game that just constantly needs to updates and support. I don't know how people ever thought that was the way to go, as much as people have tried to make games like that, when in contrast you can have a single player game that will be as good as it is the first day it launches, and you will have to do minimal updates, maybe throw some DLC to bring back an audience or reinvigorate it, but you're not constantly trying to bring in a percentage of your audience that you're losing every week, every month. Let's see, Double Fine Let's see, what was Double Fine talking about? Yeah, Double Fine has 3 job openings right now for Systems Programmer, Diversity Manager, and Finance Analyst. There is a Diversity Manager I want to talk about at a certain point here that isn't from Double Fine, but I will leave those job listings alone and just point them out. Video Games Chronicle has a feature here. Nintendo needs to port these 12 games before the Switch 2. There's plenty of gold to be mined from Nintendo's back catalog. In particular, I definitely think I would have been happier playing Wind Waker on my Switch recently instead of playing Skyward Sword. I never played Skyward Sword, but a lot of what I didn't like about Breath of the Wild is proposed and done in Skyward Sword, whereas Wind Waker may be the last great Ocarina of Time 3D Zelda game, which is really only about half of the Zelda games in the first place, because there is a lot of Game Boy and NES and Super NES Zelda games that are top down, and those feel like they should have been split off series. At some point, the Adventures of Zelda should have been the top-down games, and then the Adventures of Link should be the 3D platforming games. And they tried that, really, with the Adventure of Link, the second game to come out in the series. What's the other list? Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD. I haven't actually played Twilight Princess, so that would be another one to probably play before playing Wind Waker. The Wind Waker remake in particular has some improvements to the loading, so it's a better game almost objectively than the original version. Star Fox Zero, I would like any Star Fox game to come out, whether it's Star Fox 64. I believe the Super NES Star Fox game is on the Nintendo eShop. So maybe Star Fox 64 is also available on the eShop. But I'd like to see a significant number of games from Nintendo also have disc releases instead of being on the eShop. Again, I haven't played Star Fox Zero though, so that would be another game to play. I don't know the Pull Blocks Pushmo series. I can skip over that. Metroid Prime 2 and 3 aren't on the Switch. I thought the Metroid Prime trilogy was released. Nope. Metroid Prime Remastered was one of the best releases in 2023. So, yeah. 2 and 3 remasters still should come out. Metroid Samus Returns, the 3DS game. Rhythm Heaven, I would skip. Kid Icarus Uprising, I probably would like to play this, but I imagine it's not much of a game. It's kind of crazy they even tried to bring back Kid Icarus, but heck, it was worth an effort. Pilot Wings Resort, or just Pilot Wings 64. Yeah, I haven't played Resort. I have no rhythm, so I don't care about Jam with the Band. Elite Beat Agents, I know, has a very strong fandom, even if it's a smaller fandom, but I imagine there are some licensing issues around that getting ported. Hotel Dusk and Last Window. A lot of these are 3DS games. Excite Truck and Excite Bots, but not Excite Bike. I guess that probably has already been released. Of this list, they said there were 12 games. I'm not sure I really see 12 games here that I would care about. And some of these definitely are just first-party Nintendo games that they could and should release. Whereas some of these definitely feel like they're more licensed games. And if 3 of your games you're listing here are Metroid games, and we know that in Japan they don't care about the Metroid games at all, that runs into a problem where Nintendo probably won't bother to do that. They also probably don't care about Star Fox, although in fairness, you probably should make Star Fox games just for all the furries and the memers out there, and all the Sonic fanboys that love the furriness of Sonic. I could see with Sonic still being a character that is appreciated, a Star Fox game should try and counter that. 2 Zelda games, I do agree with. Apparently there is a bug that's also happening on Steam where multiple uninteractive probably would be the way to phrase that, windows open up after locking the screen on Windows 11. I have not run into this bug because I don't have Windows 11 and I don't lock my screen, but one of the programmers pointed this out, and so yeah, Steam maybe has a bug to look at, but I bet they're too busy planning for the summer sale and working on SteamOS. I wouldn't be surprised if we increasingly see less and less attention paid to compatibility and a great experience on Windows in favor of just getting SteamOS to run on people's computers and the Steam Deck. We already have early Chimera OS builds of Linux where you can install something that is effectively the same source code as SteamOS, but it's just not going to have that special hardware support that the Steam Deck has. So you definitely would have to be willing to experiment to install Chimera OS on your computer and try and just live with that. It's still probably going to be decades away, if ever, before Steam wouldn't still have a major focus on Windows 10 and Windows 11 and whatever the next Windows, I guess Windows 12. But eventually I could see it becoming such a hassle to deal with Windows, and most people just playing games on their computers, that they do just want a SteamOS Linux build, and they just want to get away from Microsoft completely. Microsoft is certainly pushing a lot of people in that direction with annoying actions it takes, trying to get people to sign in with Microsoft accounts and OneDrive, and integrating Copilot, and trying to force people to use the Edge browser. Like, every new update from Windows is a dangerous update because it will just do something irritating that you didn't ask for. Moving on, Starbreeze has removed the CEO following Payday 3's poor performance. The studio's board decided its strategy needs a different leadership. Inherently, I assume this is the board turning on the CEO before the CEO turns on the board, or the whole board gets voted out by the shareholders. Payday 3's performance definitely seems poor. And frankly, I would say Starbreeze feels like it has been wishy-washy in its plans in the past 5 or 6 years, focusing sometimes on Payday 2 in one way and then not focusing on it in that way, then focusing in a different way. I believe they went from making Payday 2 a paid game to a free-to-play game to a paid game, at least in announcement forms. Maybe that was Payday 3. I think inherently there is also just a problem around Payday as a concept. Most people, I don't even realize that it's supposed to be like Left 4 Dead, but you're robbing banks. And they don't sell the game well from that concept. And even if you did sell it well on that concept, it's not as interesting as playing Left 4 Dead and fighting mutant zombies with different abilities and attributes. Payday 3, the Payday series, visually looks like just a very generic, like, military type shooter game without the military. Instead is bank robbing. Maybe something close to like the Call of Duty Extraction game, if that's the name of it. But yeah, particularly when you have a game that's mostly a shooter but has some kind of twist on it. That tends to make me not follow or pay attention to it as much as just your average military shooter does. Because I know Call of Duty and let's see, Call of Duty and Modern Warfare, I know that is just a military first-person shooter. Team Fortress, I know that's just a shooter. Counter-Strike, I know that's just a shooter. And those are big games that people just keep playing, in part because they know those games and know what they are. And there may be all kinds of different modes in each of those games, but on the face of it, they are sold as just shooters. I think these face masks also are probably a real problem. They're too grotesque and not iconic enough. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Star Wars Jedi director Stig Asmussen has formed a new studio. Giant Skull is working on a AAA single-player focused action adventure. This might be slightly older news. I still haven't gotten any chapters and clips to work on my macro. The programming seems to still be wrong. I'm changing just like 1 or 2 things each stream, and that's why it's taking so long. I could spend more time on it and get it working, but it's also not high enough priority. Here you have Komatsu with the exact same news. And then here we have GameDeveloper.com with the same news that they've ousted the CEO Tobias Sugrin. Sugrin is probably how that's pronounced. I don't know what Starbreeze owns other than Payday. So if Starbreeze was to just try and sell as a company, it feels like somebody like Microsoft or Sony would just swoop in and buy it up. And then that would just be it. You'd probably not see them make anything new or any major changes. You just buy the IP and then maybe make a Payday 4 in 5 to 10 years. id Software, Naughty Dog, and Activision veterans have formed a AAA studio called Empty Vessel. We're confident to create a AAA quality games with smaller focused teams. I don't know if id Software still exists. And inherently, whenever you have a list of people who worked somewhere else, it's usually 1 or 2 people at most that, I guess id Software does still exist under ZeniMax and Microsoft. Yeah. But yeah, it'll be years before we hear an announcement for any game. So this is kind of unactionable, unhelpful information to get from GameDeveloper.com, but this is an inside industry website that does give that kind of information. Notably, we never really hear about these companies going public, and that would be the one reason why you might say this new company is formed and it is going to be publicly traded so you can invest in it, or because otherwise you could just say this company was formed in secret 5 years ago, they secretly worked on a game, and here's a trailer for their new game coming out in a month. Wouldn't that be more impactful and more helpful? Although I guess maybe the companies need to get their name out there because they'll try and hire other people. And that is, I guess, why Game Developer might be helpful to know if a new company is formed if you wanted to go and try and apply to work at that company. Video Games Chronicle says Top Spin 2K25 will be released next month. First players and venues have been confirmed. This game, I feel like, was announced, and then the announcement date was announced at the exact same time. Definitely don't recall seeing anything called Top Spin 2025 before this announcement, and we already have an announcement date. And they've got just a few celebrity face scans, and I would say These face scans don't look particularly amazing as far as quality goes. And if we look in the background, let's say the audience doesn't look particularly great. Is this what tennis players wear these days? I thought they were still doing the ridiculous opulent white type outfits. It's nowhere as bad, I guess, as what volleyball players wear, certainly, as far as showing off their bodies, although maybe tennis would be more popular if they were wearing two-piece bikinis or just shorts for the men, although the clay element of tennis probably makes that really dangerous if you were hit in it completely unclothed with a tennis ball, but their arms and legs are exposed anyway, so the danger of being hit with a tennis ball is still high. I guess that pickleball fad has died down now. Yeah. But yeah. I feel like tennis in particular, of all the sports, well, this is also true for basketball and most of the sports, but tennis is a sport that's just not watched, I would suspect, as much as, say, basketball or football. So it's probably not appreciated as much as far as the level of skill for the professional players compared to an average player. And so I do think that people who would engage in tennis probably think they can play tennis just about as well as a Serena Williams. I think the other Williams sister has retired. And I guess Roger Federer is still playing too. Just threw a mug, a plastic mug that I drank all the water out of. That was that noise. Yeah. And so the fact that I'm going out on a limb here and making this thought public that I think a lot of people think they can play tennis almost as good as a professional makes a very small gap between the need for a video game and just going out and playing tennis yourself. Whereas professional football players and professional basketball players are playing at such a high level that even people who do play football or basketball for fun know that they aren't playing anywhere close to the level of the professionals. And so to have an experience similar to the professionals, I feel like those people definitely need to play NBA 2K or Madden, where yeah, I think the audience is just smaller, perhaps for the reasons I've stated for tennis games. And personally, if I was going to play a tennis game, I'm either going to go two ways, and this is true for a lot of games. I'm either going to want a Mario tennis game, which is probably what I would want, something silly with power-ups and spins, or I would want something with either really high realistic graphics, better than these face scans, or I'd want something that was really mature, that takes it in a silly direction where there's blood and violence or just straight up nudity. Yeah, the fantasy of the girl next door in the tennis skirt is something that is in the minds of many people, certainly. Yeah, and it would be kind of crazy to make a Mortal Kombat tennis type game or a Leisure Suit Larry type of tennis game where there's straight up nudity. So Mario tennis almost certainly is the right move if I was going to play a tennis game. Moving on, a puzzle adventure game called Paper Trail launches May 21st for all consoles, PC, iOS, and Android. I don't know if that really should have been big news, but I opened the tab, so we'll talk about it anyways. And then we already talked about the Pokemon Company establishing a new Pokemon Works. This is quite the display wall of what is probably less than 1% of all the toys that Pokemon has made. If I was to scan this, I would suspect that almost all of these toys and books and things are within the past few years, 2 or 3 years. None of this looks like really old Pokemon toys. But yeah, there is an almost infinite amount of Pokemon toys and licensed products that Pokemon has been able to make and have major success around, which very possibly has also led to the Pokemon Company resting on its laurels and being lazy instead of constantly trying to make better games or lean on the profits from the games in particular. At a certain level, I could see the Pokemon Company at some point just giving up on making Pokemon games and straight up just focusing on making plushies, toys, comics, manga, anime, and they could probably make enough money to stay as a business just in that direction. Although you probably would eventually lose your audience if you didn't make any new games at all. But most of the new Pokemon games, though, aren't adding too much to the concepts, or sometimes they're adding one major concept like Mega Evolutions. I think that's one of the things they added, but then the polish on the games are pretty bad. Let's see, SNK and Eureka have announced a collaboration to revamp a non-fighting game IP. Unfortunately, that is all we know about it. This is from Gamatsu, and I have no idea who Eureka is. Endless Ocean, Pac-Man 99. Some kind of Chocobo games. Yeah. Eureka seems to be just a second-party game developer. But notably, it does seem like they worked on several of the Nintendo Tetris 99, Super Mario Bros. 35. I'm not sure that even came to the West. Which maybe highlights that they are not making any more online Pac-Man 99 type games for Nintendo. And then SNK games developed here. It's a lot of fighting games, Neo Geo Pocket games, Mega Man Battle and Fighters. Well, maybe that's the secret here, is that a revamp of Mega Man Battle and Fighters is going to be made. Maybe it's Samurai Showdown. We look at games published. I don't think the list is much different. Big Bang Pro Wrestling's also a possibility. I feel like this Gamatsu list, however, is probably a little inaccurate. I wouldn't be surprised if there's older games that Eureka and SNK have worked on that I don't know about. SNK has been around forever. Eureka, I don't recognize. So here's GameDeveloper.com's more liberal lean on this situation. We do have finally a mainstream video game journalist site talking about this, and their twist in the headline is certainly opinionated on the situation. There has been a follow-up somewhat on this on Reddit also that we'll talk about, but let's go through the full story. So the way they're twisting this is, why are Valve and Discord permitting harassment against Sweet Baby Inc? If you haven't heard of Sweet Baby Inc, good. You're not in one faction too deep either way. But effectively, Sweet Baby Inc seems to be a consultants forum, a consultancy group that has been hired by several game developers for specific games to give more liberal SJW type advice to certain games, which you can use the Steam curator group Sweet Baby Inc Detector, which is not affiliated with Sweet Baby Inc, on Steam to see the games that they are not recommending because Sweet Baby Inc was involved. Which, when you go through the games are very diverse in how the type of games they are and the feel I would have for them. And yes, some of them are like are a little bit SJW, but a lot of them don't really cross that line. It is not really harassment to reveal or report that a company from their own website says and claims that they worked on a game, that they were hired to work on a game. And it is not that crazy or harassment to say, if you are so inclined, to make the argument that if you're so inclined, you might want to boycott these games because of Sweet Baby Inc.'s involvement. I would say that would be kind of crazy, because the games that Sweet Baby Inc. were involved in seems like they weren't that involved, and are just very different games. Most of the games, when I went through the list, were actually reviewed very well. So the better way, certainly, to decide whether you want to buy a game would be to look at the customers' reviews and see if people are happy with it. But yeah, game developers is saying it's that Steam and Discord are being used as a base for hateful reactionaries to single out and harass game developers. They call Sweet Baby Inc. a narrative consultancy group. And then Sweet Baby Inc. themselves, I think, are pushing this idea that they are a victim of an online harassment campaign. They worked on games like Alan Wake 2, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League. Notably, most people love Alan Wake 2 and Spider-Man 2. Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League is the only one. Why? The answer is frustrating and hard to put into words. Users on the websites like Twitter and Kiwi Farms. Kiwi Farms is still around, apparently. They are making the argument that Sweet Baby Inc. has an overarching influence on these games, and accusing of it injecting a political agenda into them by advocating for diversity. Now, almost certainly, they did advocate for diversity, but I think for the most part, a lot of these games ignored that. Like, every now and then you might have something. But yeah, I don't recall there being any major controversy around Spider-Man 2 or Alan Wake 2 of being woke or having a political agenda that is deeply invested. And inherently, the companies that hired Sweet Baby Inc. already had a liberal-leaning political agenda, and you're joking yourself if that wasn't the case. But yeah, I see this a lot of times. You'll have very left-leaning sites like GameDeveloper.com that will feel like they need to white knight or straw man other the companies, and then it just comes off as kind of ridiculous in that the left-leaning websites like GameDeveloper.com feel like they are just being triggered and putting out an article and talking about something and causing a Streisand effect that otherwise would have just not been covered in the first place. Of course, you could also accuse them of censorship if they didn't cover it. Now, the update on this, I would say, since there really seems like there's nothing to this story other than the outright call by GameDeveloper.com of censorship from Valve and Discord, which Valve and Discord would be wise to not fall into calls of censorship, otherwise it's going to create a slippery slope in which everybody's going to call for censorship against anybody who makes a curated group pointing out that a company, that certain games are the kind of games that certain people won't like. If anything, I would say Sweet Baby Ink Detector's curated group is a great way to look at games that you should consider yourself whether you want to play them or not. And if you really hate the fact that the Miles Morales Spider-Man, who is being put in Spider-Man 2 because of DC, not because of Sweet Baby Ink, is too woke to have a black Spider-Man character, well, that right-leaning conservative audience is being served just as well. And frankly, there's probably more benefit to society to let bigoted people make a list of games that are too woke for themselves and still contribute to the gaming industry in some level than have them just overreact and call for bigger boycotts. So, yeah, this is a very long article again from GameDeveloper.com compared to what they usually write, and it really highlights how GameDeveloper.com is way more pro-censorship as a decision, as an idea, than anything else. The update to the story, though, is that here's the curated list. Well, we can just highlight these games again. A lot of these are not out yet. A lot of these are rated very positively. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for instance, very different than Afterlove EP, very different than Gotham Knights. And in all fairness, I wouldn't recommend Gotham Knights either, but I don't think it has anything to do with it being too woke. But yeah, a lot of these games are on my wish list and are rated very positively. But yeah, just a wide variety of games when I say diverse games. And yeah, there's some diversity here too. You have some characters that happen to be African as the main protagonist instead of just your average white male. But yeah, if Sweet Baby Ink really had a lot of influence, Gotham Knights would have all been about Batgirl, and it would have been the black Batgirl we saw in the CW Batgirl series, or Batwoman series. And yeah, that didn't happen. But yeah, I keep trying to get to the follow-up. The follow-up on this is that there's a post on Reddit talking about one of the ladies who allegedly, and I can only say allegedly because nobody's really covering this and doing the research to make sure if any of these facts are true. But allegedly, this lady is now working with a small team within Ubisoft, I believe, and she has publicly gone out on an interview talking about a game that was made a while ago, talking about how she actively went out of her way to not hire white people. So just blatant racism directly from her mouth as far as hiring decisions go, which in most situations would be completely illegal. You definitely don't say it out loud. We've seen a similar situation relatively recently. We have gotten a lot of people don't understand that if you're against racism, you have to be against all forms of racism, and you can't just say racism doesn't include white people because they're a majority, which is a ridiculous argument that I think only intellectually dishonest people would even try to make. Certainly, you can try to hire the best person, but you should try to hire the best person. You shouldn't just hire somebody based on the color of their skin. It was never right to hire white people because they were white. It's never going to be correct to hire black people or Asian people because they're black or Asian. And inherently, for game development in particular, you want people who have a diversity of experience to add their input more than the diversity of their skin color. So a rich black guy raised in the exact same situation as a rich white man is going to have the exact same experience for the most part. And so they're not going to add a different perspective during the development of a game. Ideally, you'd find a happy middle where you're not having people hiring only minorities just because they're minorities, and you're not having people excluding minorities just because they're minorities. We want to get, ideally, I think everybody wants to get to a point where you're not considering the race of anybody and instead considering either the character of their spirit, there's a better way to say that, or the skill level and experience level they have. Yeah. I'm glad it has so far only been GameDeveloper.com who's made an article about this, because this is really very much a non-story. And if Valve really cared, or if anybody really cared, they could report the curator. And I imagine Valve is not going to do anything here. There's just no reason to do anything about this. It's just a curator group that has 276 followers. So it is being of some value or some interest, at least, to a significant number of people. Like, I think I made a curated group on Steam and it probably has just me as one follower. I don't think I did anything more as far as posting reviews or rating things. This group has been around since January 29th also. Let's see, YouTube on March 12th. One of the things also that I think you take from this is that there are so many games on Steam too that you can be pretty picky based on any criteria to limit yourself just down to the experience you want. But if you are really going to be bigoted and just anti-woke and want to boycott all the liberal companies that make games, then you might as well just stop playing video games, because they're all outwardly going to present as woke, regardless of whether they internally think that way or not. For the most part, almost all companies just want to make money, and they have more opportunities to make money by being more liberal and left-leaning. There is a specific company that rates companies, and it affects how they're treated and how they get bank loans based on their social impact, and a lot of that is more left-leaning concepts. But at the core of it, every corporation is just a greedy monster that just wants to make money. And it is all about capitalism and nothing else but capitalism. Moving on, over 14,000 games are now Steam Deck compatible, including 4,600 which work great on the Steam Deck right out of the box. Which, honestly, I would like to see that number flipped. I'd like to see over 10,000 games that work great on Steam Deck right out of the box instead of 10,000 that require some tweaking. The Steam Deck, for me in particular, is very helpful in that it would let me play games while my computer was doing something different. Which is the one reason why I wouldn't want to buy a Steam Deck console, because then I would just need another TV in my room, and I already have 3 TVs, which is probably too many. Let's see. Koei Tecmo has the Fatal Frame and Project Zero franchise on sale that's on Steam, which is effectively just Fatal Frame made in Blackwater, which I believe is a remake of maybe the first game, and then Fatal Frame Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, which maybe is a remake of the second game or the most recent game. There are more Fatal Frame games than these two, but not on Steam. And then I wanted to talk about this. So in the last stream, I saw that this Super Game Boy Quest creator was giving away their game UI for free. You can download or claim. And so it is like a Game Boy Zelda type user interface to make Game Boy Zelda looking type games. But the one thing you can't really do when you give something like this for free, what would be the reason and the motivation to use this instead of making your own user interface? Which, in fairness, a lot of these user interfaces probably are not copyrightable or have been copyrighted by somebody else, or you've made something too close to the copyright of somebody else, say Nintendo and Zelda. But ignoring all the copyright issues, what's the one thing you would want to do with a user interface pack like this? You would want to make a video game. Why would you want to make a video game? You would want to sell it in a commercial aspect. So what's the one thing you can't do with a license? You can't say use these assets for non-commercial projects only. So it's really important to say also commercial projects. And so yeah, I wanted to just point that out. In fairness, I will let you in on a secret. I misread this the first time I looked at it, and I only read the first sentence that said non-commercial, which led me to this whole thing. To credit somebody with a link to their pack, attribution, as it called, is not that big of a demand. To be allowed to adapt and modify the assets. What you can't do, however, is distribute and sell the assets directly, even modified, which is fair enough. You can't claim the assets are yours, which arguably, if you put a copyright on a game in general, you are claiming a lot, if not everything in the game is copyrighted by yours. But that, and then they're uniquely saying you can't use it in a crypto, NFT, or meta related project, which seems like a weird restriction. Inherently, while these user interface elements look nice, if you were trying to make a Zelda game, I just don't see a reason why you should make a Zelda game that is all just in green and white and 4 different shades of green. We still are over glorifying what were actual physical limitations of the original Game Boy, and we've become nostalgic for them. when there really is no reason to be nostalgic for him. Alright, well, I'm gonna pause the recording and take a break, and then I'll be right back to continue the stream. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, let's move on. So, then we will now look at all the games that came out on the last stream on Monday and see which of these might deserve to be put on the fall list and which of these might deserve to have a YouTube short made on them, made from them, for them. Got a couple of Chinese games, and it looks like I may have reset my computer, so none of these tabs are loaded up. Yeah, it's another Western, pretty poorly animated visual novel. The animation style here is, and the anatomical elements here are really off. Even if that was supposed to be an art style, then explain why this looks so good for that one picture. Road of Heroes doesn't look like anything. Ashes from Ashes Bloom. Yeah, every time I get into this section of the stream, I question, how can I make this a faster or more interesting experience? One or the other or both. Just don't ever really know. Give that one a chance. Which probably means I'm on the wrong side of the tabs. Yeah, because that's going to bring me back there. I need to swap over to the other side. So yeah, Reigns Beyond, Lunar Lander Beyond, and Multiversus are all going to have games that came out. We're going to get YouTube shorts on them. Yeah. I never can think of a way to do this. I suppose theoretically if I had some kind of co-pilot, they would be going through these games and saying, hey, check this game out. But that still probably wouldn't change things too much. It might let me stretch out. I feel like I've seen this character in other visual novels. It's probably been done before. Let's say that this is probably a no. This is an English-Russian game. Language also, which is a bit of a red flag. Inherently, before Total Biscuit died, his podcast was doing a similar thing to what I'm doing, which is at some point he was looking at a significant number of the games that were coming out on Steam, and then eventually they just lost interest and started talking only about 2 or 3 games that came out in a week on Steam. Then eventually they just gave up on it in total. Although it was a self-fulfilling prophecy in part because they were saying that the viewership would drop at the end of the stream when they start talking about new games that came out on Steam. Well, your viewership on Steam on YouTube is going to drop at the end of a stream no matter what you're doing. That's just how it goes. It is always going to go down negative unless you do something really crazy or get really lucky. And inherently, when you're talking about new games, you're talking about games people are not familiar with, which is going to mean people aren't interested in the games. That the whole point is to get people interested in the new games. I think Total Biscuit's podcast before he died probably handled it poorly in that they were actually talking about the games when they should have really just shown off the games very quickly instead of describing the games to the 2 other co-hosts and jumping between 3 different co-hosts who are talking about certain games. They're spending too much time researching the games, considering how the vast majority of games on Steam, as you can see here, are extremely skippable. They just need a cursory glance, and that's all it takes. The Shadow of the Evil Tower is probably too generic a name to say yes to it, but I'm going to give it a chance anyways. It probably isn't much of a game. What you have here is a striking character, and then what might very well just be an infinite runner. Yeah, now that I've scrolled down and looked more, it looks like it would be more frustrating of an infinite runner than I'd actually want to play myself, so I'm actually going to take it off the fault list, but I will make a YouTube short on it. I also have no idea what it makes a successful YouTube short. It does seem like it is very much a case where you have to just throw everything in the kitchen sink out and see what catches people's attention. I did watch a YouTube video where somebody was using Microsoft Copilot to make AI generated image. You can't make thumbnails though for YouTube shorts. They have added a way in which you can merge a YouTube short with another bit of footage, whether it's widescreen or portrait or landscape, to do a collab basically. But pretty obviously that is yet another feature that points to YouTube expecting people to use shorts like people on TikTok and Instagram use shorts. There isn't a direct connection there to the way I make YouTube shorts, which is very different. Yeah, I don't think we need to show off a solitaire game. There is also, with YouTube Shorts, this nightmare scenario where there is zero encouragement to make less content that is better content. You have a minute to make a video at most, and you are just encouraged to make as many shorts as possible. That's why they want like 90 million views to get monetized if you're a shorts creator. At a certain level, if the views were way lower as a requirement to be monetized from YouTube Shorts, and people were just encouraged to make really high quality 1-minute videos, which people kinda are making decent quality 1-minute YouTube Shorts, that might save people more time instead of making super long videos, but probably not much, because for every minute of editing you're probably spending 3 to 8 minutes of work. So it's just moving the amount of work you would spend, the amount of time you would spend behind the scenes instead of in front of the camera. The way I run my channel, as far as just no edits, long plays, is designed specifically to avoid the behind the scenes editing. Yeah, I definitely don't know with my long-windedness how I would edit my long plays down. Like an entire episode being 22 minutes to an hour plus. How in the world would you edit that down? You'd have to skip out on almost all the content. I would more than likely need to just re-script some kind of review if I was going to do that, and do more like a X-Play style review back in the day when X-Play was something people knew about, where it was 2 to 5 minutes of talking about the game with gameplay footage in the background. This Yump Grill seems to intentionally have some thick booty on the character that you really don't see in the game. I assume this is supposed to just be Jump Girl. Brutal precision platforming game. Not something I really need to put on a fall list, but I'll make a YouTube short around it. A lot of these games, very generic titles too, like Monster Shooter. Right. So yeah, that was all of those. Which that'll bring us to the SteamDB list, and we'll see if anything new is happening here on the top 20 list of games being played. Palworld holding on to the 10th spot. Last Epoch maybe fell down a little bit, maybe not. I'm forgetting the order here. What would be probably the most interesting on this list is if we saw anything that was particularly old, like Overwatch 2. Let's open that as a new link, first of all. And then let's see if there's anything here that would have been from EA. Here's Balatro in the 45th spot. Myth of Empires is a newer game. It's not one of the EA old games. Yeah, if there was going to be any high number as far as concurrent players around something like Dungeon Keeper or Saboteur, it would have to have been for like one day, pretty much, and that's it. I also question playing Hand of Fate 2 if something like Slay the Spire isn't just a better twist on that type of game, because it speeds up the whole process and integrates the fighting process better than the way Hand of Fate 2 handles it. No, I'm not seeing anything in the top 100, unfortunately, from EA, which in all fairness it probably doesn't deserve to do that. So looking at my chart, there was a day in which data points were missed, so I need to clean up the chart so they'll connect. Otherwise we have Palworld falling down from this point quite a bit. GTA, I believe, going up. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, kind of high. Last Epoch falling down also. Monster Hunter World, Call of Duty, Elden Ring. Helldivers 2 falling down also. Naraka Blade Point staying about the same. Apex Legends staying about the same. What we're really noticing is that very rarely do you see a game cross a certain barrier up into the 400,000 concurrent players, and some games may on launch cross that barrier if they're extremely lucky, but then they're going to start falling downward and downward. But that may very well be the strategy for a lot of these games too, is to have a very strong start and then try to slow the decline as long as possible, because in particular if you are like Apex Legends here, Apex Legends in November was doing pretty good, lost a bunch of people's attention, then spiked probably because of an update, and is now maintaining a pretty high level, where you have other games here that are kind of consistently staying around, with Counter-Strike 2 in particular being way off the top of the chart. We're not yet to the Steam sale. Last Epoch. Can we get a review here? Pop up? Nope. Okay. I think Last Epoch is still being received pretty well. I'm not sure I really knew you could play RuneScape on Steam. Through Steam. Spell Rogue. Let's see this game too. So I suspect still that if you see a game like Starfield here, which I wouldn't really recommend buying, in fact, I really need to question why that's even on my wish list at this point. It's so mixed reviewed, so poorly received. Or Untitled Goose Game, which I would recommend as overwhelmingly positive. If you see these on sale for like 50 cents, 50% off, or on sale at all, the day before Steam Summer Sale, my suspicion is then these games won't be on the summer sale. And increasingly, it does seem like games that are on the summer sale are smaller games. So, like Resident Evil 4, Metro, Dying Light, all of these are probably games you should buy now or wait till later to buy after the summer sale. I'm still hoping the Steam Deck OLED gets discounted during the summer sale, or they've just bundled a lot of store credit. I'd be fine with just a lot of store credit. Let's see. Recommended games based on games I play. A lot of these are on my wish list, but I would say a significant number of these games are not actually games that are close to what I play. So I would say this recommendation is probably a little off. Whereas Lego Brawls, Lego Brawls was on Steam, is a decent recommendation for playing Lego Pirates of the Caribbean. Lego 2K Drive, it's not a good recommendation. Jamie's Toy Box, I suspect, isn't a kid's game. Kiki looks like it's a racing game. So maybe 2 of those recommendations are correct. Recently updated games based on what have just been updated. Could be useful information. Shadow Hand. Then we'll look at the new and trending. So the concern was that if you were to look at the new releases here, well, that all of those would be games, very old games from EA. Now the new and trending, a couple days later, seems to mostly have balanced that out, and we are seeing other games. So those new games were trending for just a day or two. The Danganronpa, the Spike Chunsoft publisher sales, probably a good time to buy all of that. Yeah. And it may have been this game, Backpack Battles, that came out on the same time EA released games. But I've seen this game be promoted, so it really didn't get buried that much. So yeah, if we look at new releases here, otherwise, I think it may have been this game actually. So let's talk about that game. Regency Solitaire 2. So these would have been new releases, and I think it was this game where somebody came out on Twitter and was playing a little bit of the victim, although not really too much, saying that she released the game the exact same day that all the Command and Conquer extra games that weren't already on Steam were released in Dungeon Keeper 1 and 2, alongside several more games from EA. At a certain level, it does highlight, I think, a problem in that this new release field, depending on if people really shop by this new release field, it doesn't scroll any further. There isn't a show more button. You can browse all under $10. You can see more popular new releases, but if you're just going to look at this page, it is a flooding of Steam to have 5 Command and Conquer games taking up the bottom part of that, and then the Saboteur, Dungeon Keeper 1 and 2, and Populous the Beginning, SimCity, all from EA in the under $5 section. All right. Lego Brawl is on my fall list. I guess the question is, would I really want to own this game? Well, here's the problem with it. I think online PvP has had a 24-hour peak of 8 and an all-time peak of 85. So that's just not relevant enough on PC for what looks like a Smash Brothers clone. This is a great example of the non-TT game Lego games that Lego has experimented with but pretty much failed with. Brick Tales, on the other hand, is an example of a non-TT Lego game that actually did succeed. Notably, this is more of a Lego game where Lego Brawls is just minifigures fighting each other. Clash of Artifacts of Chaos looks interesting. It's a single player game. It's rated very positively. Came out March 9th. So that's just another example of a game that I overlooked. Yeah, I spend all this energy trying to look at every single game and I still miss games. It's annoying, to say the least. If you do get to this point, then yes, you will see Command and Conquer and overwhelming Potions: A Curious Tale, but also it's overwhelming a difficult game about climbing, or Snufflekin, Melody of Moomin Valley. Yeah. But yeah, I would lean towards saying EA shouldn't be allowed to put more than one game out per week. Or maybe you have some limitations saying if you're going to put out more games, then you get one per weekday, work day, Monday through Friday, and then you can put out as many as you want on the weekends when people are probably going to spend less time looking, or more on like Mondays when people, whatever would be your least popular day, to try and balance things out a little bit. Regency Solitaire 2. Guess I'd be willing to play this game, so I'll go ahead and put that on the wish list. Potions: A Curious Tale. I did see, I put it on the following list. It looks alright, but it doesn't look amazingly great. And it definitely has a decent audience for just a few days being released. So, yeah. Maybe this is a case where, because this developer lightheartedly complained about EA's flooding of Steam. It got her enough attention, but not too much attention, or got the game developer, I assume it's a her, enough attention, but not too much attention to cause a backlash. El Paso elsewhere. Third-person shooter adventure game. Is this a VR game? No, it's a single-player game. But honestly, it doesn't look interesting enough to me, so I'm going to take it off the following list. I need to clean up my follow list quite a bit. And this is a great way to do it while not shopping too much. Put On Guard on the wish list. Starfield we will remove from the wish list. Mostly negative in most recent things. Spell Rogue from February 12th. I need to make a decision as far as how many card-based games do I want to play. This is an early access, so I'll put it on the follow list. And then I wanted to see Overwatch's page. Let's see, how do we get to the store from that link? Okay. And this was a newer game, so that should get a short. So here we have Overwatch 2, mostly negative in 34% in the last 30 days, and overwhelmingly negative over its lifetime since August 10th of 2023. So nobody really is liking Overwatch 2. In major part because I think they took down Overwatch 1 and drastically kind of changed what Overwatch 1 was. Definitely tells me we can take the follow list off of this. But it is a real event. Interesting. An actual event with Cowboy Bebop, which maybe points that their success rate is just so low at this point that the only thing they can collab with would be a very, very old but well liked and well known anime. This might also be a case where they're trying really hard to get a new audience of Asian players or anime fans. Here in this you can see Ein Wrecking Ball. Who is Ein? Ein Wrecking Ball would be the dog. This is Ed Sombra, I guess. Spike Cassidy, Faye Ash, and Jet. Yeah. Yeah, they have aged Ed incredibly quite a bit and changed the hairstyle and added guns when Ed never fired a gun, showing more belly than you'd really show. Add blue fingernail polish. And they definitely have added robotic arm elements in all the characters. It is really a tragedy for anybody who is a fan of Cowboy Bebop to see the characters just perverted. There's just no other way to describe it. The other thing I would say that was a problem, at least initially in launch, is that they increasingly armored up just every single character. Particularly, it felt like the female characters just had a lot of armor on them, but male characters too. It's just turning more and more of what were human-looking superhero type characters into robot people in iron suits, which made them less appealing. But I think the vast majority of hate is rightfully coming from just how poorly they've supported Overwatch 2 and how unfun the players of Overwatch 1 found Overwatch 2. Alright, well, let's now go through the clips, and fingers crossed I actually will, the clips will actually get made. I need to quit calling them the clips though, they are headlines. We're going to read through all the headlines pretty matter-of-factly to make clips from them later, if that actually works. YouTube is seemingly moving in the direction of making clips more of an important thing, in that they are going to let you see who has made clips based on your videos, which you'd think they would have added that before they even introduced the idea of clips. But yeah, I definitely think increasingly they will merge the idea of individual creators making shorts with the idea of viewers being more interactive and making their own clips and their own shorts. And eventually I imagine they will merge what a clip and a short is, for the most part anyways. But yeah, here's the Video Games Chronicle news. Let's begin reading. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth Queen's Blood expansions are a possibility, says the director. Queen's Blood was one of the game's main side quests. So is this new content? It's like a card game inside of Final Fantasy 17. I mean, Final Fantasy 7. Yep. I wonder if that really is the role of card games, is to have just a game like Gwent in something like Witcher 3, and then if it happens to become really popular, spin it off as its own thing. Seems like a lot of extra work, though, for a mini game. But it is more interesting than, say, lockpicking in Skyrim, which nobody would play a lockpicking Skyrim spin-off game. Moving on. Saber Interactive has removed references to Embracer from its site, suggesting it's been sold. The latest PS5 system update adds DualShock improvements and lets you dim the console lights. Wow. It was a few updates ago, I recall, I might be wrong about this, that they updated the ability to dim or change the lights on the controller. You would think that if the lights on the console itself were dimmable or changeable, you would have put the update out at the same time instead of keeping them separate. I almost wonder if this is just busy work that they're having their firmware people work on, or it's just really low priority things that they're getting done when they have free time. It definitely seems like from day one, being able to adjust the color of the LEDs or dim the color of the LEDs would be helpful. I did find out that on Amazon they have light blocking and light dimming stickers if you have annoying LEDs that light up or stay lit at all times. For the most part though, you could just put, say, electrician's tape over an LED to get the same effect. And most devices don't have a permanent always on LED anyways, without some way of turning it off. We are far past the point where modern electronics only can turn on an LED or turn it off. Nowadays they can control them, flicker them, send signals, error messages through them. Anyways, moving on. Arika's vice president has shared an image of a mysterious Mega Man design. Atlas apologizes as Unicorn Overlord physical stocks sell out in Japan. Epic confirms its new Unreal Engine pricing, keeping its promise not to change it for game developers. Final Fantasy music legend Nobu Uematsu thinks modern movie-like game music is uninteresting. That was a mouthful. Nobuo Uematsu. This is, I guess, a follow-up from an interview or a comment we saw from him before. I kind of agree with him. Particularly, it makes a lot of sense that he would say that, since he's not going to make movie-like game music. Movie-like, I think, probably means in this case that you are just using pop music as the backing track for scenes in movies, instead of composing new songs or new background music. And certainly in video games, it just doesn't work to have a lot of pop music in your game, unless you're just doing a GTA radio type thing and playing pop music that way while you're driving a car. You can get away with that. But yeah, Final Fantasy music in particular would not, it really wouldn't make a lot of sense in a Final Fantasy game if you, let's see if I can make a reference here, got to Sephiroth and the final boss fight with Sephiroth in one of the Final Fantasy things, and then you had that pop song from that girl that goes, "I'm a bad guy," and does a bunch of trance music and a lot of beats and thumping there. Yeah, I wouldn't possibly know the name of that girl, and she's probably not even that popular these days. And it's not any better if you were to pick songs that were older pop songs too. Like, I want to hear David Bowie's Under Pressure playing in the middle of a big fight in a video game or Final Fantasy. Even though I think Under Pressure is probably a really good song, it just is the kind of songs, music like that, should stand alone and be listened to alone. Arguably, entire soundtracks should be listened to in a row. Of course, people don't do that these days. Notably in Japan, because of the copyrights, that stuff would just never really fly. And even if it did fly, you would get more than likely weird Japanese pop songs that would probably come from like K-pop or J-pop bands, probably J-pop bands in the games, which wouldn't make a lot of sense to any foreigners. Or you get weird old Japanese music that is almost downright racist in its sound, and that it's ancient Japanese songs from 200 years ago that is in the public domain. I definitely hope to see composers continue to have success and stay around as far as game design, and I would like to see it expand quite a bit. But I imagine we won't see too much expansion. Far too many people develop games and just have no concern in the world as to what the music should sound like, or the games are short enough that you really don't need to compose a song. I've played a lot of games that just use one public domain song over and over again. Even in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, what are we listening to as a Japanese game? We're listening to one composed song that just plays in a loop over and over again, and it's a composed song, that's fine, but it's not very diverse. It's one song and that's it. People just don't focus on music as much as I think they should, as far as a way of creating art. Music in general, I think, may be more of a passive activity, listening to music, and video games are more interactive, and so that might be part of the contrast there. Of course, I start talking and that messed up my clip there, so I can't really fix it. So let's just pretend like I'm going to read the headline and the clip timing will be off. Grandia HD Collection is finally coming to the Xbox and PlayStation consoles. It seems like two very different types of animation. I wonder if this is games that were released fairly far apart from each other. And this is a great example of just showing where anime and anime style has evolved, where a game would have this kind of animation in the early 2000s, and by the late 2000s it very much might have this kind of animation. Moving on. Rise of the Ronin story trailer introduces the key factions vying for power. Former id Software devs announced a new AAA studio called Empty Vessel. F1 Manager 2024 will let players create their own team this summer. System Shock's remake is coming to consoles in May. Payday 2 now has almost 85 times as many average players as Payday 3. Boy, does that highlight the failure of Payday 3. The game has attracted as few as 130 players during some days. So it's not really the problem with the concept of Payday, if people are still playing Payday 2 quite a bit. It's a problem with Payday 3 in particular. I would almost argue what Payday 3 probably should have done is change the masks and maybe even moved towards a more modern, futuristic environment for bank robbing. Like more auto turrets and lasers and silly things like that. There is possibly an argument, maybe I'm wrong about this, to have sequel games jump around, have your Modern Warfare type game, then go back to World War II in the next game, then go back to modern day in the next game. Moving on. Persona 3 Reload expansion pass is on Game Pass. Starbreeze removes its CEO following Payday 3's poor performance. Increasingly, we're noticing that Video Games Chronicle also is not bothering to have screenshots at the top if they don't need a screenshot. That's a good decision on their part, I think. They were kind of crazy sometimes when they'd pick a screenshot for no reason. Star Wars Jedi director Stig Asmussen has formed a new studio. Top Spin 2K25 will be released next month. First players and venues have been confirmed. SNK is planning to revive a classic non-fighting game IP. Monster Hunter Stories Remastered gets a release date. Monster Hunter World has sold over 25 million units worldwide. The Pokemon Company establishes new Pokemon Works subsidiary. Over 14,000 games are now Steam Deck compatible. Battlefield Studio DICE loses creative director Craig Morrison. The former Activision boss Bobby Kotick is reportedly interested in buying TikTok. I did hear more news on this. Apparently, the law or act that's going through the House of Representatives and Congress would force TikTok to sell 75% of its company to an American company, and there are definitely some free speech and freedom of actions takings clause issue in particular around that idea. Otherwise they're going to be banned. That is the threat, is that TikTok, if this law got passed, would have to sell 75%, or they would just be banned from the United States completely. That there are some takings clause in the Constitution challenges that almost certainly that would violate, but we'll see how the courts would decide that. It's the beginning of a journey at most, if that law even happened. But notably here, it's important to know 25% of it still would be under control of TikTok, a Chinese company, which inherently is going to be open to be influenced or under control by the Chinese government. And the algorithms seem to all be built and run out of a black box algorithm in China. So that probably wouldn't really be affected much. All the data very well, even if only 25% of the company was owned by TikTok, still all the company would still have to, all the data would still go to China and still be influenced by whatever TikTok or the Chinese government would want people to see. Moving on. Today's Forza Motorsport update overhauls its divisive car progression system. NBA 2K24 is joining Xbox Game Pass today. Final Fantasy XVI producer says PC players can expect a pre-release demo within a year. Multiversus returns in May, running on the Unreal Engine 5. Let's see, now normally this would bring us to the Gematsu articles. Unfortunately, my macro didn't run correctly, so what I think I need to do is just manually open all of these tabs. Let's see how we can do this. That. Open everything from 2 or 3 days ago. If we go back too far, it's not really a big deal. These links may be out of order somewhat too. Let's not go any further than that though. Lunar Lander Beyond, I think, is one we already have talked about, but we were on the second page to start with, so we still need to open everything on the first page. And this is all stuff that my macro is supposed to do automatically. You can pretty well tell that it is a lot of extra work, a lot of extra time to manually click on everything. Okay. Then we're going to have to come over here to the other side while the tabs open up. PS5 system software update is now available. It has DualSense controller sound enhancements and share screen interactions. Seems like the brightness is dim, medium, and bright, not any percentage slider. You'd think you'd just make it a percentage slider if it could be a percentage slider. It's an LED, so it's almost certainly pulse width modulated, which means you should be able to slide it down by large amounts of range without any problems. Eerie Band Shadow Legacy for PC launches April 10th. Let's see if we have that on the fall list already. Nope. What does this game look like? Some kind of stealth game. Might be something. One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 DLC character Roger has been announced. Deceit 2 is going free to play, coming to the PS5 and Xbox Series on April 3rd. Apparently this is a multiplayer social deduction horror game, but honestly it kind of looks like a low-effort adult visual novel from the terrible, probably asset-flipped 3D models. V Rising launches May 8th for PC and then later in 2024 for PS5. So this one's coming out of early access after a couple of years. Macros Shooting Insight is coming to the West in 2024. For historical reasons, I'd like to see Macros catch people's attention in the West once again, but really it's just a product of many decades ago and a type of anime that's just not even thought of as anime. That you have fighter jets that maybe transform in Macros, and the Robotech anime in the West was a combination of like Robotech and Macros and one other anime series that were in no way connected, and so that creates this very weird nostalgia for something that technically really didn't exist. Certainly when you're looking at Macros here, this isn't probably what you're thinking of as far as what Macros would have been in the old days. No bright, colorful anime girls. This was delayed, apparently, at the last second, with no new release date. Reggie, his cousin, two scientists, and most likely the end of the world launches in 2025 for the PS5, Xbox Series, Switch, and PC. That is quite a mouthful of a game. That definitely looks different. Sea of Stars 3-player local co-op mode has been announced. A puzzle adventure game, Paper Trail, launches May 21st for all consoles, PC, iOS, and Android. Put that on the follow list. Feels like my headline rewriter editor should have put a comma here, but apparently something's wrong with that. It's not worth my time trying to fix it though. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown post-launch content roadmap has been announced. Summer Games Fest 2024 showcase is set for June 7th. Venture to the Vile launches May 7th for PC and in late 2024 for the PS5 and PS4. This apparently is some kind of Metroidvania game. There is a lot of Metroidvania games I'd like to play and get around to playing and haven't gotten around to playing. Most of them not really what I'm looking for. Terra Memoria launches March 27th. Although in all fairness, there's just a lot of games overall that I haven't gotten around to playing. And that is my great shame, certainly. It's just not playing enough games fast enough. And then making too many games. Crypt of the Necrodancer DLC Synchrony now available for the PS4, Switch, and PC. wonder, yeah, at some point, if they ever figure out a way to do it, they are going to start selling people time. Or tricking people into selling their time. And at some point, we'll start playing video games in our sleep or extend our lifespans just to enjoy more creation. But until then, we need curators and critics to help us decide what's worth spending our time on and what isn't. PlayStation Plus game catalog and classics catalog lineup for March 2024 has been announced. Multiversus launches May 28th. Final Fantasy XVI for PC is in the final stages of optimization and a demo is planned before release. Totally misread that one. Phoenix and Gayer Studio announced a free-to-play titles Boomer Road, Not to Lot, and Duranko Wonko for PC. Interesting to announce 3 different games at the same time. And it doesn't seem like they have links to any of them. You have very different looking games here also. I feel like this is probably what we're going to start seeing though, is more and more small collaborations of companies releasing and announcing games as their own directs instead of even being on Nintendo Directs or PlayStation Directs or Xbox Directs. Moving on. Street Fighter VI DLC character Akuma launches this spring. Exoprimal X Mega Man collaboration announced. Title Update 4 launches April 7th. Monster Hunter Stories Remaster launches June 14th. Yeah. Should make a YouTube short around this, but I'm not sure this is really the kind of game I'd want to play. Monster Hunter Stories 2 Wings of Ruin is coming to the PS4 on June 14th. This game is from 2021. Ghost Trick Phantom Detective Remaster is coming to iOS and Android on March 28th. I believe this game had already come to PC. It was originally a 3DS game. SNK and Eureka announced a collaboration to revamp a non-fighting game IP. Sophia the Traveler launches April 11th for Switch and PC. This is a hidden object point and click game, which normally I would say no to, but they did bother to put out a press release. Monster Hunter World shipments and digital sales topped 25 million. AAA game studio Empty Vessel announces establishment developing an immersive shooter, which that's kind of an old phrase at this point and I don't think means too much of anything. Top Spin 2K25 launches April 26 for PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series and PC. You have completely different covers for what look like different platforms. I do want a good tennis game on Steam. I want to find a good tennis game on Steam. But I just don't know if Top Spin at a premium $60 or really closer to $120 is the game really to pick. Street Fighter 6 X Monster Hunter 20th Anniversary collaboration announced. Grandia HD Collection is coming to the PS4 and Xbox One on March 26. Super Sammy Roll 2 announced for PC. This is a, I guess, kind of platformer slash monkey ball type game, it looks like. We'll put it on the wish list. The Last Case of Benedict Fox Definitive Edition launches March 26. Every time I hear the title of this game, I think it's some kind of Sherlock Holmes type story, but I don't think it really is. Star Wars Jedi series and God of War 3 director Stig Asmussen establishes a new studio called Giant Skull. Rise of the Ronin story vignette trailer. Puyo Puyo Puzzle Pop announced for Apple Arcade. Children of the Sun launches April 9th. I do recall this one. Not sure this game is really going to be received well. I'll be interested in seeing what happens here. It's a third-person puzzle shooter. F1 Manager 2024 is announced for the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and PC. I'm also noticing that we seem to be having more collabs now, collabs being more uniquely based on Japanese games and Eastern games than Western games. I wonder if we've hit a season of collabs, or if maybe that is to make up for the fact that just fewer games are getting announced and released, because it definitely also feels like fewer games are getting announced and released. I kind of don't want the rest of 2024 to be a slow, dull year, but it wouldn't really hurt me if it was. We would really have to go 4 to 5 years straight of just no good games before people would even start to think about playing less video games. A detective noir adventure game, Nobody Wants to Die, has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. The noir genre is something that I don't think too many people really understand or get to see enough of. It is very possibly that noir at this point is really just a parody of itself from what it would have been originally. And actual noir movies from decades previous are pretty inaccessible and hard to sit through. The System Shock remake for the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series launches May 21st. Always confused as far as whether the System Shock reboot or remake has come out and whether it was a reboot or remake. I think it bounced around, trying to figure out whether it should have been a reboot or remake, and had inconsistent messaging, I think in part because of that. Resident Evil 4 Remake sales top 7 million. Famitsu review scores for issue 1841. They give Contra Operation Galuga a 30 out of 40, and Lisa Definitive Edition a 29 out of 40. Both fairly low scores. Not a lot of games coming out being reviewed this week either. Witchspring R for PlayStation 5 and Switch launches in the second half of 2024. This one overwhelmingly positive on Steam. And there is a justification for making a YouTube short on a game that's pretty old if it's coming to new consoles. Okay, so after that manual adjustment, that was all of the Gamatsu articles. So let's just go through the GameDeveloper.com headlines and then we will be done for today. Here we go. Keywords tried to make a game using Gen AI but said the tech was unable to replace talent. The best results and quality needed can only be achieved by experts in their field utilizing Gen AI as a new powerful tool in their creative process. Now, inherently, I don't think Keywords is actually a video game developer. Let's see, they worked on Alan Wake 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 and I don't know in what way did they really work with these games. Keywords tried to make a 2D video game solely on generative AI tools and technology. The R&D initiative was dubbed Project Ava and saw a team initially from Electronic Square Malta evaluate and leverage over 400 unnamed tools to understand how it might augment game development. As detailed in the company's latest fiscal report, however, the project ultimately proved that while some generative AI tools might simplify or accelerate certain processes, they are currently unable to replace talent. Over the 6-month process, the team shared their findings across the group, highlighting where Gen AI has the potential to augment the game development process and where it lags behind. Even doing this experiment arguably is not moral, and we're going to make a moral argument here, which means basically an opinionated argument from me, because CEOs don't care. They will gladly fire everybody and then say the company can just use Gen AI or AI to generate things well before that's actually true, and then they will just eventually, after months of struggle, replace the AI with cheaper, lower paid new employees. So there's a dishonesty certainly amongst why a CEO might lay off people in the first place, which is mostly they want to keep pay down. They want to lay off people and hire new, cheaper, younger people that can be exploited more. And this is where unions would be very helpful to prevent those kinds of layoffs. And they're going to simply use AI as an excuse. We definitely are not at the point, from anything I've seen, where AI can actually help you in any consistent manner. Even the Project Sora that can make video clips takes, I think, about 8 hours to make 7 seconds of video clips. It's just not attainable to really do that. Most AI has major noticeable problems, and there's huge backlash if you do try to use AI. Now, I say this experiment in itself is immoral because they just shouldn't have tried it. It is also suspect because the people doing the experiment almost certainly don't want to see themselves laid off or replaced, or their friends laid off or replaced. So they were almost certainly, at least subconsciously, going to tank the results and make it look as negative as possible. Whereas an AI might go in the other way and sell itself as being way more capable than it really can be. And there really is just not going to be any true reporting from an unbiased source either directions. At some point in the future, yes, AI will make everything and you'll just have a holodeck you can talk to, and it'll create entire forests and entire cities and villages with people walking around. And at that point, the hope is that we will be post-capitalism and everybody will just be on some UBI type plan, and then nobody is going to have to work to have their needs, their food, their shelter, their clothing supplied through labor and work. But we're not anywhere close to that yet, so AI is going to have the brakes put on it for probably a long time. At some point, the idea of it being unpatriotic, regardless of what country you're from, to lay off people and replace them with computers and non-human AI is going to have to be pressed, or a massive amount of tax is going to be put on AI, which that works fine too. If you just start taxing every single company up the wazoo for using AI, and then that just pays for social services, that might be a solution too. But we kind of have to discuss and find these solutions to automation before automation in any form is allowed to happen. And Keywords definitely feels like they're being a little slimy here, trying to set the stage for a report that some years down the line to say that AI will be viable. But right now I think Keywords themselves are in danger of losing business if they say AI would work. It's also noted that Keywords is pushing ahead with other Gen AI R&D projects to ensure it can provide current insights in an ever-evolving part of the market. So even after this experiment, they're not giving up. Keywords made headlines last month after failing to credit some translators in the work on Ubisoft's Skull and Bones. The company has since told game developer it will amend those credits in a future update. So they seem like they're mostly a translation or a second-party developer of some sort. And that's certainly where it's going to be hidden, is that you'll have second-party developers that go uncredited, unnamed, replacing first-party developers at companies like Ubisoft or Nintendo. The vast majority of games, I think, from Nintendo are mostly developed by second-party developers. Yeah. Moving on. Playdate games can now be written in Swift. Pokemon Works subsidiary has launched within the Diamond Pearl remake developers. Backpack Battles sells 100,000 units 2 days after its early access launch. Former Star Wars Jedi director unveils a new single-player game studio, Giant Skull. Starbreeze ousts CEO Tobias Sorgen with Payday 3 in dire straits. id Software, Naughty Dog, and Activision veterans form a AAA studio called Empty Vessel. Monster Hunter World tops 25 million sales to cement a record-breaking status at Capcom. It launched 6 years ago and has now become the best-selling Capcom title in history. Possibly one of the best-selling games in the world overall. Although it's kind of hard to tell, since Nintendo doesn't really provide numbers and a lot of other companies don't provide numbers. Battlefield creative director Craig Morrison quietly departs EA for a new studio. Moon Studios' Ori franchise has sold 10 million copies. WB's Multiversus makes it official, Unreal Engine 5 powered return in May. the Super Mario Bros. Movie made a bunch of money, so Nintendo is making another. Alright, and that's going to be it for this show. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. Thanks for watching.